that 5 years ago, Pixar was on top of the world. Incredibles 2 debuted on this weekend in 2018, did $183 million in 2018 dollars, not 2023 ticket prices. I mean, what this is probably what 200. I mean, it's a lot more today, but ginormous opening. Incredibles 2, 5 years old. Boy, how time flies. But any thoughts? This, I mean, I guess this is a leftover from the Lasseter regime. Lasseter probably has his critics. I know he has probably at the behest of Iger, he did more sequels than he probably wanted to do in that last decade. And Incredibles 2 was something that maybe people wanted, but maybe not the most creative direction for Pixar to go to, especially with all the other sequels they were doing. But do you guys have any love for Incredibles 2? Does it stand up 5 years later?
Yes.
Yes.
And yes, absolutely yes.
All right, fair enough. Moving on. No, or wait, should I move on?
Just since we are on the topic of Incredibles 2, just wanted to know, is it this film that's like the highest grossing animated film?
I believe it has the biggest opening, and it is certainly one of the highest grossing movies. Yeah, it did 183 from the jump. It ultimately did $609 million. It sits as the 13th highest grossing movie of all time, unadjusted for ticket price inflation, but just and that is number one as far as animated movies go here, at least domestically. Worldwide, it would be Frozen 2 or The Lion King, depending on if you think that quote unquote live action remaking is animated or not. But Incredibles 2 still did $1.24 billion worldwide, all in. So Super Mario Brothers actually has surpassed that. By the way, Super Mario is sitting at 1.33, although it did less domestically and did a little bit more internationally. But yeah, Incredibles 2, just an enormous box office powerhouse. A little surprised by the love it gets because I mean, it's my sense that people like it less than the first one, but they certainly benefited from the strength of the franchise. People had been craving another adventure with The Incredibles, and 14 years later, they finally got it, and they just rushed to see this thing. This was such an event.
Yes, Pixar just made two of the best Fantastic Four films that exist.
100%
I agree.
cosign.
I agree. Me three. And, at the time, the excitement of the short Jack Jack attack was loud. So, yeah, people, the Incredibles is a wonderful movie. And, the second one is pretty damn good. So, I mean, jumping back and then continue taking us down anniversaries, but, it's just kind of common that when the really supreme talent moves on, moves away for whatever reasons, it's changed. It's a very real thing. They bring out, the best in all of the people who are working on those films. And so when that key talent moves away, you get something different. And if there's new great talent that fills the void, fantastic, but or incredible.
Yep, yep, great point. Talent plus, I would say the philosophy of the business at hand, and this is why Disney is in such a pickle. They lost the talent, and at least from the outside, they kind of have the wrong philosophy when it comes to making these movies. And say, I think we've been kicking Disney a lot lately, but it's just funny. It's funny how that's come to a head because I think we were pretty early on with our Disney criticism, but now it's like everywhere. It's just funny how the media just jumps on this bandwagon. But so if you hear us talking about Disney, we're not the bandwagoners. We were early on in this. It's the New Yorkers, the New York Times, all these other mainstream media that are finally catching on to the problems with Disney. It's
And
like
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, to follow your train of thought, Brandon, but I do find it interesting that Disney being in a pickle coincides with the rise of pickleball. I think there's something in that. But I digress.
How many people know what pickleball is?
Brandon is frantically Googling pickleball right now. I'm sorry to derail the program.
Yeah, I assume it's a game or sport. Yeah, I have not Googled it yet, but I probably I was close to being frantic, but I said, if I go down that road, I really need to get at the link. I should really first get the link to the next anniversary before I go there. And by the way, uh, just to put a bow on 2018, not only was The Incredibles 2 reaching such great heights, there was also the weekend of such great lows. That was also the 5 year anniversary of Gotti, the John Travolta biopic of John Gotti, which is believed to be one of the worst movies of all time. It was a fun weekend. I mean, it got a lot of Razzies or something. I don't know. I just remember I didn't see it, never saw it. I think it was directed by one of the actors from Entourage, something like that. Anyway, John Travolta, uh, and yeah. So Gotti is also 5 years old. Incredibles 2 and Gotti are 5 years old. But if we go back 10 years, and this is why yeah, I mean, we talked about Green Lantern opening on this weekend, but actually 10 years ago, the very movie that The Flash references and basically retells the tale of debuted 10 years ago. And you know what I'm talking about? I'm talking about Man of Steel. Man of Steel, 10 years old. And it did, on the weekend alone, it did $117 million. Not even adjusting for ticket price inflation, it did more than double the business of The Flash in 2023 without even adjusting for ticket price inflation. So if you throw it in the Thursday, it was at 129. So 129 including the Thursday versus 56 for the Flash including the Thursday. So more than double than the Flash just in raw dollars. And you see the weekend there, $117 million for Man of Steel. And talk about counter programming. Well, we didn't have a Pixar picture, but we did have a Seth Rogen, James Franco joint. We had This Is the End, also starring Hermione from Harry Potter, counter programming her persona, I guess. And that picture was number two. It did about $21 million, which was a solid number for a comedy. It also, that one opened on a Wednesday, so it already had $33 million in total. R rated, raunchy, end of the world comedy. So we had this 1 2 punch. I mean, more punch than Man of Steel, obviously, but 1 2 punch of Man of Steel and This Is the End. 10 years old. Any words for either picture on the stage?
James Gunn, if you're listening to this replay, don't cock it up. We need you, Superman.
I mean, I second Mark's thought, but to be honest, Man of Steel is one of my favorite DCU films. This is my third favorite, in fact, behind Flash and the Suicide Squad, James Gunn's Suicide Squad. So yeah, I mean, I'm not ashamed of it. Honestly, I love that film because of the spectacle that it offered. I mean, I get what people mean when they miss the hopeful aspect of the original Superman films. I remember seeing Superman Returns in theaters back in 2005, five or six. I'm not sure exactly when it came out, but I remember watching it in theaters. So for me, till date, I think Man of Steel is my favorite. But yeah, I mean, other than that, I also really love This Is the End. So that's great. I often get confused between This Is the End and the Edgar Wright film At World's End.
That's funny, mixing up those two. Those are two very different, two different. Well, At Will's End, isn't that a miniseries? Um, yeah. Anyway, to go back to Man of Steel, yeah, I actually okay. The film's not that great, but Henry is just he's my Superman. I really wish they could have kept him as Superman. Um, that's just my personal opinion. I'm not saying Man of Steel. I don't have as much fondness for it as Sid does, but I really think he embodied Clark Kent, and I'm sure a lot of people are just like booing me in the background somewhere right now. But I just do. I liked him as Superman, and I really wish that they had kept him, but I get it.
I don't disagree with you, and you know that Christopher Reeve is my Superman, and I go to the same scenes all the time to talk about how great he is an actor and other films. I like him, Henry, as Superman. I just don't really like what his Superman did. Um, and so I would have loved to have seen more of him. Yeah, I don't disagree with you, but I'm writing something very different in the back channel. No, I'm kidding. Kidding.
One of the great what could have beens. Uh, I mean, if they hadn't gone with Zack Snyder and that whole Dark Knight wannabe approach, things would have been very different for the DC franchise. I think they would have had a greater success. This was not uh, the Superman people wanted. Even if they wanted Henry Cavill for Superman, they didn't want this tone, this style, this movie.
Um, I just wanted to add something, and that would be the fact that I completely believe that this was, I mean, for the time it came out in, it eventually became the first film of a expanded universe. But I don't think when in the on the get go when they really planned this film, it was supposed to lead into a big cinematic universe. Uh, One of the fact for that is that this was written, like the story for this was from Christopher Nolan, and that was something just given his track record with what he did with the Dark Knight films. I'm pretty sure Warner Brothers were like, "Do you have a kind of similar vision for Superman?" And yeah, he worked with David Goyer on this, and yeah, and then he said, "I can't direct this because this is not something I would direct, given the fantastical nature of the character." So he picked Zack Snyder, and I think this was meant to be a one-off. Should have been a one-off. I mean, I think it, as far as to go, I could say I also see it as a one-off because it's really out of everything that came out of this. This is really the better Zack Snyder stuff, and then comes what James Gunn did with the Suicide Squad and then the Flash. I think also the part that Flash really plays off of the events of this film also adds to that.
Yeah, I think history agrees with you, Sid, because I know Brendan, you just went through the opening day numbers. I believe you'll give us the final totals and everything, but it was so financially successful, and given what Marvel was doing 10 years ago, that's why they're like, well, let's expand it into a multiverse. I agree with you. If this had just been a one-off and they had reset it, just thinking of how Man of Steel ends, you could have totally reset and still had Henry there as a Superman. Um, I think Amy Adams is of course Lois Lane. That's fine with me as well. Like there was ways to fix this, but I think they doubled down on Zack Snyder's vision, which which really just wasn't successful for a lot of reasons. Um, but yeah, I think this film is not as bad as people said it was at the time. In retrospect, seeing what else came after it, so I think history is actually on this on its side for Man of Steel. But yeah, what could have been, huh?
Yeah, I in all fairness, I should watch this movie again. When I did try to watch it, I did fall asleep. It just was overwhelming. I mean, I was turned off with the opening scene on what's the home planet called? Krypton. Yeah, I thought that went.
Krypton.
Oh, Krypton. Yeah, I think that
Yeah, if Marlon Brando's Krypton, it's both work.
Krypton. How does Brando say it? Krypton. I don't know. Anyway, yes. Uh, yeah, went way on too long. Was this is a Superman movie or is this a sci-fi space movie? And so I think they needed to get through that far more quickly, and then maybe I wouldn't have fallen asleep if I wasn't on Krypton for an hour, or at least it felt like an hour to me. Sorry. Yeah. So I was. It turned me off from the jump. So, but if you like that sort of thing, then I guess it's fine. But for me, it was a turnoff, and and the whole dour tone, a little bit more monochromatic. I mean, I want bright and colorful. I'm like, gosh, I want the 1978 Superman. I want that. That's Superman, and uh, and I know it's good to make changes and do different things, but we're talking about Superman and what he represents and what the trailer for this movie promised. I think this had a really good trailer, almost an inspirational trailer, and I think the movie lacked that. I mean, although there's some fun things about it. I mean, you got both Russell Crowe and Kevin Costner, so his two dads were Robin Hood. Isn't that funny? He had two dads that were Robin Hood in in this movie, and that was funny. But in the way Kevin, oh yeah, maybe that's not a spoiler, but I thought that was so lame. The whole situation with how he died in the movie versus Glenn Ford in the 1978 Superman. Uh, and it's just so long. Anyway, so for me, it didn't work, but maybe I should give it a go again. Ugh. I don't know. We'll see. One of these.
You don't have to do it. It's okay. You don't, I just feel like you're gonna watch it again and hate it more. But the trailer, this I do agree with you. I remember watching the trailer and thinking, this is gonna be the moment. Like, I can't wait for this film. If the trailer, if that, the feeling that you got from the trailer, if that had been the film, whole different conversation today.
Yep, it did look like it was something what Martin Scorsese refers to as cinema.
Yep, and as for the box office, it ultimately did $291 million domestic, another 377 internationally for a grand total of $668 million. Doesn't sound like a lot today, but again, we're talking about 2013, so it's a lot more than it seems. Domestically, it was the fourth highest grossing picture of the year. However, this is where the foundation gets shaky, and not just because of the movie they chose to make, but also the financial performance of the movie, because this movie was criticized for perhaps not being a profitable movie because it carried a price tag of $225 million.
25. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was expensive. And to really greenlit that sort of budget for yeah, I mean, I get that. So that's what a lot of people don't understand, honestly, is especially people from certain cult. So I don't need to specify the name of the cult, but yeah, I mean, I've seen so many senseless comments regarding this, especially comparing to let's take it some of the better films in that cinematic universe, which did not do financially well, although, but this one had that price tag, and Batman v Superman had that sort of price tag. And a film called Batman v Superman honestly should have done $1 billion just because of that name. Like, there's no excuse. The second weekend drop off was phenomenally huge. Like, it was huge drop off. And for the record, I don't like, as much as I love Man of Steel, I hate Batman v Superman to that extent. I love the Batman part of it, but overall as a film, it doesn't work for me.
Uh, yeah. What came after this? But you guys aren't alone in liking Man of Steel. I mean, it does have its fans. So again, like I said, to give it a fair assessment, I would need to see it again. But Batman v Superman, all of this really shook the confidence of Warner Brothers and resulted in one of their many changes they made. That kind of led them to giving Snyder the boot when it comes to doing the Justice League. And they were changing horses so often that they really shot themselves in the foot. So maybe I didn't like the Snyderverse, but at the same time, it was confusing and self-destructive for them to not see it through. And so you go from Batman v Superman, and they've already molested that because I haven't seen it, but I hear that the director's cut is superior to the theatrical cut. So you had that, And then instead of doing Justice League, you did the Justice League, as in Joss Whedon. Hey, we want to do an Avengers movie. Hey, let's get the guy who did the Avengers and let's see him clean up Zack Snyder's mess, supposedly. So that changing of the horse resulted in further disaster, compounding the problem. So yeah, you bet on the wrong horse, but at least let the horse finish the race. And they did not do that. And I think that's partly why we are sitting where we are today with the state of the DC universe.
This is how we have a 4-hour Justice League director's cut, right? Zack Snyder's Justice League. Batman v
Yes.
Superman is a terrible film. It is such a terrible film. Even the director's cut is terrible. I understand why they were like, we need to figure out how to right this ship at some point. Um, hindsight is 2020. They just like screwed it up even worse. But I understand why they were like, wow, we have messed this up so colossal, like so terribly. And I get what you're saying, Brendan. You haven't had to watch that terrible film. So, and it was it's so many levels how terrible it is. So I understand why they got rid of Zack Snyder. Justice League, I actually think it's okay. I I'm saying okay, okay. I'm not saying it's a good movie. I just think like it's rewatchable. But yeah, there's just I think Warner like they freaked out and they just didn't know how to take creative control because I think there was no creative vision. All these films we're mentioning, there was except Man of Steel obviously had a clear creative vision. It's just that people just didn't like that vision. Um, and I think it would have been braver for them to say, "Well, we're sticking with this," but they were just hemorrhaging so much money and I guess clout that they just couldn't stick with it, which I guess is a whole nother story.
Hey, Snyder does know how to make a zombie movie, though.
Oh, yeah, Dawn of the Dead remake, but I wouldn't say Army of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead remake, by the way, written by James Gunn. Army of the Dead, not written by
What a
James
full
Gunn.
circle moment. But I thought Army of the Dead was fun. It wasn't like good, but it was a fun movie. I had fun watching it, especially for a Netflix film.
I rather prefer the spin off they did for that film called Army of the Thieves. But yeah, I mean, I don't like Army of the Dead. I love Dawn of the Dead. The tiger sequence is the cool though.
Yep, interesting. So, well, I think we've hopefully given Man of Steel and This Is the End their due. They are both 10 years old. Wow, time flies, but as we go back in time, you see why they did things the way they did them today. Why The Flash came out this weekend, same weekend as Man of Steel. Why Elemental comes out, same weekend as Incredibles 2. And here's some other reinforcement of that for two movies, actually. If we go back 15 years, I mean, these are movies celebrating their 15th anniversary. The Incredible Hulk, the second entry in the MCU, a mid June release, big superhero comic book movie. Did some big numbers at number one. And this weekend, we had a callback to the other movie that opened 15 years ago. This weekend, we had The Blackening. Well, 15 years ago, we had The Happening, baby.
It has to be intentional.
Has to be.
Okay, this is where I lose the room and I say that I actually like The Happening. Yeah, I'm sorry, I did. I like that movie.
I actually can't wait to watch The Blackening. I think it looks hilarious.
I'll be watching it tomorrow, planning to watch it tomorrow.
And for me to contribute useless information, there's an Anthony Quinn movie from the 70s called The Happening, which is kind of a hippie, conservative culture clash, unfunny comedy. I leave it to you to look it up and find it. Not the same happening.
Hey, this is a side note, but you sound a lot like Kevin Smith. If you've ever heard him in any podcast before, your guys' vocal sound, you guys sound a lot alike.
I've never been told that. Thank you. I think.
What a coincidence that I just got a notification that he posted a new video right now.
This means something.
Something is happening. Can you
The
feel it?
happening is happening. What's happening?
Yeah. I mean, I noted Incredible Hulk is the movie that opened that weekend. It did Incredible Hulk, $55.4 million in 2008. Basically the same number as The Flash, actually a little bit more because of the preview situation, but we'll just say through Sunday in 2023. So 15 years of inflation, and The Incredible Hulk was a bigger movie than The Flash. I mean, as we go back, just to again uh, further dig the Flash's grave here, man. That is a terrible, terrible opening. Anyway, The Incredible Hulk was number one 15 years ago. Number two was Kung Fu Panda in its second weekend, and debuting at number three was The Happening from M. Night Shyamalan in La Bing Bang at $30.5 million, and which was a good number for that picture. I mean, that was a very good opening weekend, even though it was number three. Uh, so, with people malign Shyamalan a lot, but he did have some box office clout, especially at that time. I mean, he was coming down from his Imperial phase. The Village kind of stopped that. Although, again, I think that's one of his better movies. But at the time, people hated that movie because of how it ended. Talking about endings there, and The Happening is seen as one of his bad movies, but he still had some uh, box office clout to do $30 million for this Marky Mark picture. It's pretty dang good. I remember the trailers were quite striking about what is happening. When you find out what is happening, maybe you're disappointed, but this movie is has its charms apparently, which is why it's probably more fun to talk about than the Incredible Hulk, right?
And this, I can't keep my Hulk straight. The only way I will remember which picture you're talking about, 50, who was in it? Eric Bana or Ed
Ed
Norton?
Norton.
All right. Now I'm back.
Directed by Louis
Nobody wants to
Leterrier. No, I'm just saying directed by Louis Leterrier, who made Fast X.
Well, there
Yep,
you go.
everything's coming.
Well, there you go. Full. That's a real full circle right there.
Absolutely. This is why those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. So apparently, a lot of people didn't know their history this summer. But yeah, we joke the Incredible Hulk, but it was one of those stepping stones in the MCU because it that was a movie that had overcome the reception to Hulk 2003, the Ong Lee one with Eric Bana as the
Eric
Hulk.
Bana. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, which actually came out in mid-June. That just is about to. I'm not sure. That's celebrating its 20th anniversary. So that is also part of the confusion because these were both mid-June Hulk movies and number one big movies. But yeah, for the Incredible Hulk to do $55 million after what people thought about that first Hulk, that is actually pretty darn good. So I know the Incredible Hulk, gets maligned as one of the lowest grossing MCU movies, but it was trying to make a comeback. So to be fair to the Incredible Hulk, and uh, and certainly MCU has been revisiting it with I think he was the bad guy was in She-Hulk, and they're going to have some of the characters from this in the new Captain America movie next year. So the Hulk is resonating into the future here. Wasn't lost to time as we might have thought at the time, because this was before we knew MCU would be as big as it was. But yeah, so another interesting weekend at the box office there. Yeah, but anyway, the funniest thing though, again, got The Blackening this year, and back then we had The Happening. I haven't seen The Blackening yet, directed by Tim Story, and it looks like a low budget horror comedy. And as I said before, with that roughly $6 million start, it's relatively more successful than both The Flash and Elemental.
And if you're interested to watch The Incredible Hulk, it just dropped on Disney Plus.
Well, there you go. Would you guys have preferred them to stick with Edward Norton, or are you glad that they switched to Mark Ruffalo?
I'm glad they switched. There's just there's no competition there, frankly.
Me three.
Yeah, I don't think Norton was right for it, but I don't like Ruffalo for it either.
I think Ruffalo plays that. I think the Incredible Hulk is a really difficult character to play because when he's hulking out, it's pretty. obvious, but the parts in between, right? The human parts. I think Ruffalo's done a good job. Now, whether he's been given the material to really play up the Hulk for who he is, that's a different conversation.
That's
Yeah,
a really good point, and he does play the human aspect of it very, very well. I agree.
yeah, that's what I love about him. And he's in these ensemble pictures. I like his Bruce Banner or David Banner. No, wait, Bruce Banner. David Banner.
Bruce.
David is the TV show, I think, with Lou Ferrigno, and I don't know why they changed his name there, but anyway.
Alrighty, so interesting. That probably, yeah. Gosh, I think I would go with Norton only because Ruffalo I think has tarnished his brand with all his pontificating outside of the MCU. So it's hard for me to separate him in real life from the character, and of course what they did with the Hulk and the whole how MCU is going. Anyway, just not a fan of Ruffalo, and it's funny that he could have, you know, he could have done more if he just kept his trap shut, focused on being in good movies, and maybe not done so much for the Hulk because he was trying to be a thing in the early aughts, oftentimes in like romantic comedies and kind of stuff like that. At any rate, that's probably a hot take. I'm sure people disagree, but it's just very strange. I mean, do these people? I don't know. Well, still gets work for some reason. I don't know. Even though he's not a draw at all. So
I just want to. I love Mark Ruffalo. I think he's cute. I understand what you're saying. I don't know what you mean by outside. If you mean his political views or the other things he does. He does lots of other things. I have seen him in some of the romantic comedies, just like Heaven with Reese Witherspoon. Y'all know I don't like rom coms, but that's one of my favorite rom coms. It's so silly the premise, but I like it. I like Mark Ruffalo, and I think he has girlfriends, fans who love him because he's hot, and I just think he's actually played this MCU thing really well. He's getting big checks, and goes and does whatever he wants and says what he wants. And um, not every actor and actress has the ability to do that and get paid very well. So I give kudos to him on that. And he's been in really great ensembles like in the film Spotlight, which I think is a really great film.
And 13 going on 30.
Oh my goodness, yes! How could I forget that gem?
What was the
Fantastic
candy?
movie.
What was the candy? Was it the bottle caps or the rocket caps?
I'm not going to remember. I'll have to watch it again.
And I'm liking him in the moments in the trailer for Poor Things, which I'm very excited about. What is that, October? But yeah, Willem Dafoe and Emma Stone and Ruffalo are in Poor Things. Yeah, I like him as an actor. Brandon's just an iconoclast.
oh yeah. All right, all right. To each their own. But Ruffalo rubs me the wrong way. Even though it sounds like some of you would like to be rubbed by Ruffalo.
Yeah,
Yes,
no,
I'm
I
in
mean,
that category.
there's your rom-com title, Rubbed by Ruffalo.
rough,
So meta, like being John Malkovich. Rubbed by. I'm writing it tonight,
rough
guys.
Delo.
All right. All right. Well, let's skip ahead a bit. I mean, I'm all hulked out at this point, and although I could go all night with the happening, but moving on. If we go back 25 years ago, quarter of a century, this is the 25th anniversary of two big movies, and you'd be surprised, given their current standing in history, which one was number one. But debuting this weekend 25 years ago, you had The X-Files, the movie, which I believe debuted in between seasons of X-Files. They were hyping it up. Got to see this movie in between the seasons. Did over $30 million. Huge weekend in 1998. And debuting at number two, as the Disney Renaissance was waning, this one was kind of maybe suffering from that, but then kind of had a little slight nice perk up, a little nice improvement over Hercules and Hunchback of Notre Dame. I'm talking about Mulan, number two, 25 years old. This weekend we have X-Files and Mulan, both 25. Any thoughts or any love for these pictures?
Yeah, I like Mulan a great deal, and honest to God, as much as I really do like the X Files series, I have trouble remembering the film. I remember key moments. I remember remembering that I liked when it got large in scope. It sort of knew it had to be a theater piece, and uh, but I don't remember it as well as I remember key episodes of the series. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I think the film is quite forgettable. I'm not a huge X-Files fan, but I do remember watching the show from time to time and watching the film with some diehard fans who were disappointed. Mulan is one of my top three. If I was a Disney princess, I would be Mulan. So that that film is like everything to me. Um, that's who I would want to be. You know, if I was 10 years old again and I was going to Disney World, I would want to be Mulan. Not Ariel or Jasmine or Belle or any of the others. So Mulan was a huge deal for me. The song, the Christina Aguilera song, was everywhere at the time. Um, and the music in Mulan is so good. That is why the live action is just so disappointing. I'm gonna make a man out of you, and all the songs. Yeah, so now I'm just gonna rail against the live action again. But anyway, Mulan, I think, is such a good film. Such a good film.
I wasn't into X Files or Mulan much either, but I see number three, if I'm not mistaken, is The Truman Show, which I was a giant fan of. I'm surprised to see that it did that well so early on.
Truman Show was a hit, if I recall, right? And I believe it was nominated for a few Oscars. I think Ed Harris got a nod for that.
Oh yeah, Truman Show was a big hit. I think we really took the deep dive into that last week for its 25th anniversary. But yeah, that was another star power flex for Jim Carrey. Just in that period of time from 1994, I guess maybe you could say up to 2003 with Bruce Almighty. Maybe there's some other year you could pick, but I mean, I don't know if there was a bigger star ever, and The Truman Show was certainly evidence of that. For him to get that, not only a lot of people seeing that movie, but to get that movie to do that kind of business in 1998, by the way, which would put so many movies to shame today. But in Mulan, yeah, here's the question: since this is 25 years ago, did anyone see any of these movies in the theater on the big screen?
I saw
I,
both on big screen.
I saw all three. I saw Truman Show, Mulan, and X Files movie. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Truman Show as well. I did as well. Yeah, I was really young at the time. Now I think about it.
No, not me. I was born in '93. I didn't really start going to movies until a couple years later.
All right, it's always fun to note. Yeah, the only one I saw was Truman Show. I did not see Mulan in the theaters, nor did I see the X Files because I didn't watch the X Files TV show. And if you as you know, X Files was very front loaded. So even though Mulan lost the battle to X Files, it actually won the war at the end because X Files did not even get to $100 million, whereas Mulan passed $100 million. X Files still a big hit. I mean, that would by today's ticket prices, X Files would also be well over $100 million, but the point being is that it was a very fan centric affair. They rushed to see it that first week, and then not so much after that. So it's just a classic front loaded fan event. That's what was the X Files 25 years ago. And then, of course, Mulan was more of your classic Disney animated movie where it does leg out to a higher number despite. A relatively lower opening weekend versus other movies. Yeah, Mulan. Yeah, Julie, you referenced the Mulan remake. I mean, we have the Little Mermaid remake right now going. Mulan came out during the COVID. Did not play in theaters in America, at least. Was a $30 premium play, considered to be a huge flop, but they made the mistake of cutting out the music and making a lot of changes that did not make the fans happy. It didn't exactly resemble the movie that charmed people. I mean that And to some degree, Little Mermaid is doing the same. I'm not trying to open that can of worms again, but suffice it to say, if you were a super fan of Mulan 1998, just as if you were a super fan of Little Mermaid 1989, you may not be quite so happy with their live action remakes. And you would think Disney would learn the lesson of the music. I mean, that must have been one of the most boneheaded decisions to remove the music from Mulan with those such memorable songs for whatever reason that they did it. That movie, you have to think, would have done better had it still been a musical. And as far as Pixar is concerned, I know the fate of Pixar. We fear that it's going to be merged with Disney because what's the point of spending all this money on two separate animation houses? You know, Pixar up in the Bay Area, Disney down here in Burbank, and etc. I People fear that they will merge it, especially with all the money that Pixar movies have been losing of late. But if they had stuck to what I think they should have done, is this distinction: the Disney animated stuff, the Disney stuff, keep that as musicals and let Pixar be what it is, these non-musical animated events. But they muddied the waters to the point that people are confused about what's a Disney movie and what's a Pixar movie. At any rate, a little bit of a tangent, but it kind of all, uh, how it relates to today and the mistakes that were made beyond that. Because if they did a new Mulan, it could have been something, but they didn't let it be with these terrible choices that they made, including working with the Chinese government with a concentration camp to make it. So that was a bad look also for Disney.
Yeah, just a few mistakes here and there. Um, I I also want to put up there. I never liked Disney Pixar coming together. I don't remember what year that was, but what year was that? Pixar
Oh
became
yeah,
a part
was
of
it?
Disney.
Yeah, what guys was it like 2006, 2000 something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I always thought what's happening now, what was going to happen at the time then, but and of course we just talked about The Incredibles, right? Which was only 5 years ago. I thought with that merger, I thought, oh, this is it. This is going to be the death of Pixar. Um, and maybe it just took some time, basically. But I know exactly what you're saying, Brendan. I never thought this was a good fit. I thought this was going to be the end of Pixar, and I know I've just been raving about Elemental all night, but I just really, you're right. I just don't know how they're going to be able to financially be able to keep these two apart. They've already gutted Pixar, in my opinion, or maybe they haven't, and they're about to gut it some more. But I never liked this Disney Pixar merger to begin with. I just I think that was the beginning of the end. So just wanted to put that out there.
And the whole Disney remake thing is just insane. It's incredible. The 1994 Jungle Book, which is a quote unquote live action remake of the 67 animated Jungle Book. Well, they just announced they're remaking it yet again as a 2D animated film. And I just made that shit up. But it could happen.
Don't give them ideas, Mark.
Disney, if you're listening to this replay, I did not say that. You are to forget I men in black you.
Yeah. Well, Disney needs ideas. We just need to give them the right ideas. Hopefully they'll listen at some point. I mean, again, for their own good, not just our own personal taste. I mean, if they want to make money and please their shareholders, uh, that's the idea. That's where we're coming from. Anyway, so moving on, shall we move on from Mulan and the X Files? All right, I'll take that as a yes. Let me see here. So if we go back 30 years ago, there's a movie that, well, like the movies of this weekend, was seen as a failure, kind of a big failure. And that movie was a little movie called Last Action Hero. Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Ay, ay, ay. This is interesting for me. Well, continue with its numbers as I gather my thoughts.
Sure, absolutely. It debuted at number two. It opened to $15.3 million in the shadow of Jurassic Park, which was in its second weekend, coming off of a record breaking opening weekend. A lot of people believe that the dinos sucked up all the oxygen for Last Action Hero. But as somebody who was there going to the movies, Last Action Hero had a huge publicity campaign. I mean, this movie was everywhere. So it's not like people weren't aware of this movie. It's just you get the sense that people simply rejected it or were indifferent to it. This is Arnold Schwarzenegger coming 2 years after the great triumph of Terminator 2 in 1991. And here he's maybe kind of doing a meta movie and action comedy. Maybe it went over people's heads. You know what? I have yet to see Last Action Hero. I have to be honest. I do know the clip where he's playing Hamlet, I believe, and he says to be or not to be, and then he says not to be. Kind of making fun of himself. Maybe you guys can expound upon this movie's why this movie might not have clicked at the time. Still, again, a lot of people saw it. $15 million in 1993 is what at least well, that's like flash numbers today, actually. Let me double check that on the. Let me do the math on the ticket price inflation. That would be funny if Last Action Hero basically had the same opening as the Flash today, but. Yeah, it ultimately it grossed $50 million domestically, and on a production budget of $85 million. I mean, huge budget picture, seen as a big disappointment at the time. Did anyone see this movie in the theaters? When did you see it? What are your thoughts on it?
Yes,
Take it
I
away.
saw it.
Oh, go ahead, Mark.
No, 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 no. Go, go. I'm still trying to do this politely. Go ahead. Go.
Yeah, I did see it in theater. I think we were in the other room when Last Action Hero came up, right? Because my high school classmate, actually, I went to high school and to college with Zach, wrote this, right? Co-wrote it. And I remember just, it wasn't right because we graduated 90s. So it wasn't long after we heard, like, oh, he sold the script or whatever. Yeah, it's like, oh, really? And then when you heard the idea, I thought it was a great idea at that point for an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, just to take the piss out of the whole action star thing and sort of turn stuff on its head or make fun of it, you know what I mean? Or if it's the Hamlet thing, like poking Arnold for not being a serious actor, whatever. So I thought at that juncture in Arnold's career, I was like, this is great. But then when I saw the actual execution of the movie, it left a little something to be desired. But I still maintain that I thought that was a solid idea for Arnold at that point. But yeah, the execution was definitely lacking, and I do not rewatch it much.
That's a
Um,
perfect place. Oh, go ahead, Julie. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say I saw the movie as a kid, like on cable or whatever, and I thought it was really cute. Um, as a, I There was like a moment where this was one of my favorite films when I was a child. I don't know if I would rewatch it now because like how you watch some films as a kid and then when you watch it as an adult, you're like, what was I thinking? I feel like that's what happened to me with this film. Um, just because it was like so meta to me, even though I didn't know what that word was at the time. Anyway, but I remember as a kid watching this and thinking, yeah, I like this film. But I don't know if I would feel the same way watching it today. The premise is really smart, but the execution is not so much. And I remember reading reviews about this film. I was a really dorky kid now I think about it. Anyway, I remember reading reviews about this film, and basically people saying what David said, right? How it was a great premise, but the execution was really poor. And so, I mean, is it worth watching? Sure. I actually think this is a film where you could remake it, but actually remake it like properly. Like actually do the film it should be, right? In terms of it's making fun of action films and all the tropes and everything. Like actually do it properly with a good comedic twist. But yeah, I'm trying to I liked it as a kid. I don't know if I like it now.
For me, and
It
I
had a
think
lot of kid sensibilities when you think about it. It wasn't like a rock'em sock'em action movie made for adults. It did Yeah, it could definitely play very strongly to kids, just from what I'm remembering.
Yeah, the idea is absolutely great. And for me, and I think Brandon, if you care to partake, I think it's on Netflix because they have the if it's not out now, there's the documentary Arnold coming soon to Netflix, and they've dropped a bunch. There's a bunch of Arnold films on Netflix. But anyway, so I saw it in the theater. I tried to watch if it is on Netflix. I recently, in the last couple of weeks, started to watch the first 30 minutes. It's a great idea. It's for me, it's leaden. It's just kind of leaden, and that really, I'm going to contradict myself because there is sort of a briskness once it gets going. The whole thing about the kid and the reality of, I think his name is Jack Slade. That may be a
I
character,
think you're right.
and
That's ringing a bell.
and what if this is almost like my what if had, instead of the Flash, it was a Keaton Batman film without metaverse. What if, and keep that sensibility, keep the whole thing with, the kid and the worlds colliding, and this fictional character. What if it was Bruce Willis after some Die Hard films, and it was John McClane? To be meta, it's bouncing off of what's between Terminator 2 and Last Action Hero. So Arnold is not quite the action hero yet, even though there are some pictures, and he was a lovable villain in the Terminator films. So the whole thing is just kind of top heavy to me and leaden.
But didn't he
And
have
and I what if it?
Commando and Red Dawn and all those, or I don't know,
There's
whatever
yeah,
the
there's a couple of
leading up
smaller,
to it,
yeah,
and
I think so.
Predator,
Like
right?
some of the,
Was that?
yeah, some of the
Mhm.
canon films, so he is an action hero, but maybe if there was a sharper thing to it, maybe if it was one of these. I mean, for me, 25 years later, what if it was Dirty Harry that popped up, and Clint was in on the gag, and you just played that gag out of, yeah.
I
So,
love that.
but yeah, it is out there. I think it's Netflix that's got like an Arnold Schwarzenegger festival going on.
Yeah, it's Netflix. Don't they have that 3-part docu series about his life?
That's about to drop. I think it's called the Arnold. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Yep,
Yeah, they've been
exactly.
letting some sound bites go to promote that.
And there's some TV show he's in. I don't know, my family watched it and I was like, I'm not interested, but I guess he's in it. And so yeah, Netflix is doing a huge push, so probably you can find it there. Like I
Fubar.
think
You're thinking of Fubar, right?
yeah, I think so. Yes, yes. I think the premises you're talking about, I think the film really tried to play it safe. I like as a kid watching it, to me it was a kids film. The what you're describing sounds way more interesting, but not necessarily a kid film. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm talking 10 and under. I'm not talking about like teenagers, kids films. That can easily be rated R. That's my own opinion. I don't- I've said this before. People are like, you watch movies with swear words when you're a teenager. I'm like, yeah, it wasn't a big deal in my family. Anyway, so
There's
kind of.
swear words on the way to school.
No, I know, David, but this is what I'm just telling y'all what has happened before. I know. I'm like, y'all stop clutching your pearls. Teenagers know swear words. Anyway, but I think they try to play it safe because there's like a literal scene in the film where he's trying to make him say a swear word. He's like, I can't say that, and he's like, yeah, because you're in a PG film. So I really think they kind of tied their hands a bit, and I thought as a kid, oh, it's because it's a kids film, but when I read the reviews, I'm like, oh, it's supposed to be for adults. This film wouldn't be interesting to adults. It's like what Barbie's about to do, right? Like Barbie's not for kids. So I that's why I'm saying, like you're saying, Mark, all those premises you just said, that would be a way more interesting film. And this
Oh,
is something they should remake with
I
with a real
yeah,
action hero.
and I'm on a tear, because you invert all of that, but you can still make it a PG-13. You can still make it quote unquote a kids film. If it's John McClane, the reality of getting beaten up like that, walking on glass in bare feet. What really happens in the real? Yippee ki yay, mother beep. What did you say? I said yippee ki yay, motherfucker beep. If it's Dirty Harry, you get into the whole thing, and he's given the speech, and the guy runs away, and it's like, what are you speech? There's ways to invert all of that stuff that was in the public
Just
imagination.
start shooting at Harry.
you know, you invert it, and then your action hero does some learning. There's because and that happens, I think, in Last Action Hero. But
You know what would have gone
anyway,
a long way? A better villain. I wasn't 100%. I'm just starting to remember it now. I already had the like right the eyeballs with the different things on them, and I don't know. It was very like Saturday morning cartoon villain. It wasn't like had me shook in the. I don't know. I could have used a better villain. Villain.
yep, you're only as good as your villain.
Yeah, and who was the villain in The Flash? One of the other problems, I think.
In the Flash.
Yes. Sorry.
Oh,
I was just that.
General
Ge-
General Sod. He was a farmer
okay.
that came out of. Never mind.
And I guess multiverse Flash.
But let's amend this. A memorable villain that you can market. And they didn't market a strong villain for the Flash. A rookie mistake in the superhero comic book movie world. Always have a strong villain in your
Superhero
marketing.
101.
Exactly. All right, so it sounds like you guys can kind of understand why Last Action Hero was a disappointment. Here's another link. I guess in the documentary series that is on Netflix, Arnold refers to this embarrassing moment in his career. And gosh, if this was his most embarrassing moment, man, what a career. But unfortunately, there was more embarrassment to come. I mean, he played a pregnant man in a movie, for Christ's sake.
I was
Anyway,
about to say Junior. I was like, you say you never watched Last Act. I've never watched Junior, nor really had any inclination. Even when I stumbled by it on TV, I just
I have watched Junior. It is a ridiculous premise. I think there was just a phase in my childhood where what like Kindergarten Cop, all of these films, Twins. But
what's
yeah,
the
Junior
one
is the
Jingle
most
All the
ridiculous.
Way?
Jingle All the Way
That was a
is
good
yo.
Christmas movie, right?
That's a good one. That's that's one we need, okay? A movie about parents fighting over toys during Christmas? Yes. Yes, I need that
Oh, the
film.
memories.
sorry, I'm trying to update the headlines to see if it draws more people into the room. We're 15 away from 100, folks. So please, if you're still with us, please ping away, share the room. Let's get the party jumping in the final stretch here. Get us past the 100 visitor mark. I don't know what we call the 100 person mark. Let's get our body count past the 100 if we can. That's what we like to see. The triple digits here on Clubhouse. Um, but yes, of course, I never saw Junior, but Junior had even worse box office than Last Action Hero. Although I bet it didn't cost as much. Uh, and then yeah, Batman and Robin, on and on. Hey, Batman and Robin, again, another embarrassment. See, it's so
That oh,
it's so funny that we can tie we could thread we could do the thread from the past to the present actually, but I better refrain because that will involve a spoiler for a certain movie. So I'll stop there. But there is a connection. There's a thread there from embarrassing moments in Arnold Schwarzenegger's career to today, with an embarrassing moment in a movie at the box office right now. But any final thoughts on Last Action Hero before we go further back in time?
I had a quick random Batman and Robin question. Do you think that when the studio execs saw any cuts of that film, that they knew they were in trouble immediately? immediately. I know like you can be inside your own thing when you're creating, and maybe you don't perceive how awful this thing that you're working on actually. I mean, is there a chance that they knew like, oh, we better put a lot of lipstick on this pig? Because I mean, that movie is just laughable. I mean, right? And George Clooney, you know, smartly takes full participation in the laughter about him being Batman. So, but I mean, do you think like what happens? I mean, could you have seen that they're like, oh yeah, this is a winner for this
To be fair, and I'm not saying I agree with you, George. George Clooney being cast is the problem, but Arnold Schwarzenegger and Uma Thurman's in there, right? It's Poison Ivy.
summer?
Like I actually they're better than that film. Like them as villains, that's the right call. George Clooney as Batman, that's the mistake. So I mean, and I don't know at that point. You've got Arnold. You've got like these people are. I don't know what their star power was at the time. Trying to remember when Batman and Robin came out. Um,
97.
97. Okay, so George Clooney is still probably doing ER. I'm not
Yeah,
sure. I
he's
didn't watch that.
transitioning. Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, he done Dust Till Dawn,
okay.
Kings, and then something like
Yeah, so I know what you're saying. Like, didn't they realize this was a mistake? And Val Kilmer has also talked about playing Batman as well. I really think for those films post Michael Keaton, um, they just there were just a lot of different choices being made, and those films, the villains are better. Well, okay, let's forget Batman Forever for a second. Um, and maybe they thought, you know what, that's gonna save this film. Like I'm sure they knew George Clooney was not a good Batman. Watching it back, but maybe they were just thinking, hey, maybe we'll make money off of this anyway because we've got Arnold, right, from Terminator 2. I forget when. Oh my goodness, Uma Thurman and John Travolta. I'm just tired, guys. Pulp Fiction. Forget when that movie came out. When did
that.
Pulp Fiction?
94.
Yes.
Okay, so we got the lady from Pulp Fiction. You know what I'm trying to say? Like maybe they thought that was gonna be enough.
Thought they had a nice little
They had
package.
exactly, and you have Alicia Silverstone, who was in Clueless, who's Batgirl. Like I just feel like they thought we've got other stuff going on in this film
And they're introducing
that's gonna save us.
Robin.
Exactly. Exactly. So I think they just thought we've got enough to cover this, and they didn't. But in terms of like Arnold Schwarzenegger himself and Mr. Freeze, I thought I was cool with that. Pun intended. But
Well, there's an
See,
interesting.
but your line right there is even better than some of Arnold's. Like, I can't even remember them, but they were kind of bad. Like, his little cold puns he would make. Yeah, I don't know. It was kind of
Well, the parallel to me is goes to this. This is it, because June 19th today is the anniversary of Batman Returns, and I think that where Batman Returns works compared to these others, I mean, I really do like that film. I love the two Keaton films, and I really do like the choices. It's not the Penguin I grew up with, but boy, was it great, and it worked in that story. And I love Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman. The subsequent films, the problem is they hit the right balance. In Batman Returns, there's three villains: the two that we know, and then the invented one, Max Schreck, played by Christopher Walken. And they all are related to Max Schreck in some way. So they did that balancing act for me, and to this day it works. It's not too much. It's They just did the hat trick enough where it wasn't too many characters, too many villains. And I think when you get into these other ones, the Schumachers, and I think there is too many characters going on. The tones are very different. Obviously, the things we've talked about before. I kind of like Schwarzenegger's Mr. Freeze for the very reason that it did remind me, and they're very much drawing on the '60s Batman in a way, and the very fact that Otto Preminger is one of the actors who played uh, Mr. Freeze with
he
his
played it in the TV show. Yeah,
in the TV show with his thick accent. There was sort of a direct link there, and because the thing is a comedy and a parody of the '60s Batman, and I liked Uma Thurman's Poison Ivy, but there's too much going on. Um, there are too many characters, and they don't get I just think the balancing act in Batman Returns works better, so they kept adding. Let's have all of these things. Batman then does less, and it's a reactive character anyway, right? But when you've got all that in the blender, he's even doing less. And then you've add George Clooney to it. What can he do with it? And that's not really to defend Clooney, but this is why I feel that Kilmer's Batman was a little bit better, even though he was dealing with the same problems of just too many characters and not just a neon mess. And I'll stop there. I don't need I mean, screw it.
A
You're gonna.
neon mess. Yeah, definitely two different looks there between Schumacher and Tim Burton.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that makes the Burton films still creates a weird timelessness. It's that mix of Anton Furst's designs that were very much carried over, the architecture that was borrowed from very bizarre architecture around the world. That the fact that the cars seemed to be stuck in amber in the 1970s, the clothing was somewhere between the 40s, 50s, and contemporary. Somehow that mix of design worked visually in a lot of ways. And yeah, I just, Elfman's score tops Elliot Goldenthal's Batman theme in that period. So, but my main point in bringing this up, since it all sprung from Schwarzenegger in a way, is that the Batman films just dealt with too many characters, Robin and Batgirl, and too many villains. And it's just helped water down the cohesiveness of just a good pulp adventure thing.
Thanks, guys, for that Batman and Robin dive. Didn't mean to blow us off course, but thank you.
Oh no, yeah, thanks for coming on stage and contributing, David. No, I appreciate that. And it does correlate with the Flash in a lot of ways. I won't say exactly how, but just a real quick summation, though. After Batman Returns, which is celebrating its 31st anniversary, which is why we're not talking about that because we only celebrate real anniversaries, Mark.
I know it's an odd number and all that.
I kid you, but yeah. At any rate, so that turns 31, and then after that, Tim Burton was supposed to do Superman, and yeah, the Superman Lives with Nick Cage, and well, it's not a spoiler anymore, but they make a very awkward reference to that in the new Flash movie, and so that maybe he chose to do that instead of a third Batman movie. Well, anyway, they got Joel Schumacher. They do Batman Forever, and they follow the model of Batman Returns, where they're just loading up on more stars. In that case, they had added Jim Carrey, Tommy Lee Jones, and Chris O'Donnell as Robin, I believe, in that one. And it actually had a higher dollar gross than Batman Returns because they were a little worried because Batman Returns had a big drop off from Batman '89. So Batman Forever had a nice bump, and they thought, well, we added a bunch of stars and a bunch of characters, and look, we got a nice box office bump. Hey, well, let's just do more of that for the fourth one.
And and
And
and and that was
Little
very
Hollywood
real.
arithmetic.
But 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 that was very real pre-internet with Batman Returns. Oh my God, too dark, too dark. And in hindsight, perfect dark, and still fun. And then jump back, Brandon, because it's Jim Carrey, and he's a draw, you know. And why not see what a Jim Carrey does with the Riddler? So that's the plus and the minus there. Because I think as we look back on Batman Returns, it's not too dark, but and certainly compared to Batman '89, I think there's the similar level of darkness, for God's sake. But it struck people very strange, and maybe people couldn't wrap their heads around the fact that there were Batman Return toys at McDonald's. Um, but it was real, that kind of weird, soft backlash of too dark. But I'll go back to other things you've said about Jim Carrey's stardom, and yeah, man, let's go see him play the Riddler. This should be fun. And it kind of wasn't. Kind of wasn't. Kind of strained. He felt, to me, his Riddler felt, though, even and Tommy Lee Jones. And I know that there's backstory about shifting the weight of the character in rewrites. To allow Carrie some room, and that cut some things away from Tommy Lee Jones' Two Face, and the fact that the original Harvey Dent, if there's going to be continuity with other actors in this thing, um, like the Commissioner Gordon and Alfred the Butler with Michael Gough. Um, uh, uh, why am I blanking on his name? Because it's after midnight where I am. That's why. But anyway, it was just kind of a mess, and I think everybody was sort of straining to find their way in that. And I didn't find anything that Jim Carrey was doing funny. It kind of fell flat.
I'm I know this is an unpopular opinion, but I love Batman Forever. I just it's so campy and ridiculous and it just works for me. And I wasn't looking for Jim Carrey to be funny. He was oddball. And Riddler is, I don't know, Riddler, there's just been so many iterations of Riddler. I didn't like what Paul Dano did with Riddler in the Batman. I think he was funny and not in a good way. There's just like, I just wasn't scared of him not once in that film. Um, and I like what Jim Carrey did with the Riddler. I don't think he was supposed to, I don't think he was supposed to be funny, like funny. I'm not sure what people thought they were going to get when Jim Carrey was the Riddler. I remember as a kid him doing interviews about it and what he was trying to bring to that. But this is also the phase where Jim Carrey is trying to be different things in his career at that time, right? Not just the funny
Yeah,
guy.
I'm just suggesting that I'm imagining that audiences it's Jim Carrey, so they're expecting a certain thing that they get when they go to a Jim Carrey movie. Did this confuse them with the Truman Show as well? I don't know. I find Carrey. I think he's a great actor, um, and I'm not kidding. My favorite Riddler remains Frank Gorshin. And there's another what if there. What if Frank had the ability to play some of these other scripts? I mean, one of the most beautiful things I love the scene, and it's so Jim Carrey when he is literally consciously imitating uh, Bruce Wayne. These that's marvelous in the film. There
Oh,
there
you mean
are
like
moments.
at the gala or whatever it
Yeah,
was? Yeah, 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 yeah,
and
yeah.
there's little moments of that even in the lab or the company.
I know he's like, "How's
When
my
Bruce is
mole?"
being toured. Yeah, yeah. I mean, so that's very Carey, but it's also works in the film, and these are nice touches. But then it's overwhelmed by everything else, and you don't really get Tommy Lee Jones to go off uh, full scale with Two Face. And the thing about uh, Frank Gorshin is that he was basing that off of. He based his Riddler off of Richard Widmark's in a psychotic gangster in a noir picture that I'm blanking on the name. Man, it's getting late. I'm sorry. And I just, if he had had the chance to play him in something that wasn't, a self-conscious parody like the Batman '60s TV series is. Anyway, now we're really going deep into the tunnels of the Batcave here in places, but I apologize.
Yeah. Well, Batman Forever celebrated its 28th anniversary on Friday, last Friday.
Well,
For what
that's
it's
okay,
worth,
and that's a round number, so we can accept.
and yeah, I mean the Academy Awards, 2 years ago celebrated the 28th anniversary of Pulp Fiction. So I guess 28th anniversaries are a thing now. So I guess that's if you want to make Batman Forever topical. But the important thing is to also reaffirm why The Flash came out this weekend because mid June is Batman time, including Batman '89, which released on June 23rd, 1989, and basically all of them did. Batman and Robin, one of Arnold's Embarrassments. That came out on June 20th of 1997. So tomorrow will be the 26th anniversary of Batman and Robin. And but yeah, you'll see that Batman and Robin had that tremendous drop off in box office from Batman Forever. So Batman and Robin killed the franchise, scorched earth there. I mean, that's why there was no Batman movie until Nolan was recruited to resurrect it with Batman Begins in 2005, and which is why the 2005 Batman, which also came out in June 15th. So again, the same recurring theme here for Warner Brothers and their superhero movies, but Batman Begins had a relatively slow start because it was trying to rebuild the franchise after the destruction of Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. So the formula did not work. They loaded up more stars. Alicia Silverstone. Let's throw in. Everybody in this one, and yeah, it just was a big failure, and effectively the end of Arnold Schwarzenegger's career, I would argue as well. Put the nail in the coffin there as a movie star, I should say. Even though in retrospect he's not the worst part of it, as you guys are saying, just because it's silly and it's fun. But if we go back a little bit further in time, let's say we go back 35 years. Again, anniversaries are in 5 year intervals. Uh, so while Schwarzenegger had a flop 30 years ago with Last Action Hero on this weekend, he had the number one movie in 1988, which is part of his rise to box office stardom. Maybe not his most notable picture, but this is the 35th anniversary of Red Heat, starring Schwarzenegger. That was number one.
Oh,
And
that's the one I meant. Red Heat,
mm,
not Red Dawn.
oh, right, yeah, and number one movie. But there's some other interesting movies that also debuted. Of course, Big was number two, but that came out a few weeks earlier. Number three was The Great Outdoors, a comedy with I think John Candy, written by John Hughes. I know a lot of people. I haven't never seen it, but I know some people think that's a fun movie, The Great Outdoors. But then probably the most notable debut of the weekend was Bull Durham, the Ron Shelton comedy, baseball comedy drama, romantic baseball comedy, I guess, with Susan Sarandon, Kevin Costner, Tim Robbins.
The first in his baseball trilogy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the
Bull Durham, Field of Dreams, and For Love of the Game.
Yep, that's a great point, David. Yeah. So, is there any love for Bull Durham? Did anyone see it back in the day when it was in theaters? It's a
It's
little bit of a
great. The New
sleeper
York
hit.
Times actually just published an article about the anniversary of the Bull Durham. Just like in the last 48 hours, I saw it pop up in my inbox. Susan Sarandon, Tim Roth. Yeah, it was good. It was fun. And Robert Wool was funny in that too.
Yeah, I think I would have to watch this film again. I didn't like it the first time I watched it. I didn't see it in the movie theater. And maybe I just didn't get it. I had heard it was such a great film, and when I watched it, I was like, I'm not a, and I'm a sports person, so I don't know. Like,
I
and
was
I
about to ask where you stand on sports and or sports films.
no, I love sports films, David. I started off as a sports writer, so wrote about sports for five
There it
years.
is.
Um, Field of Dreams, like when MLB went out to the field, like you have no idea how much I lost my mind when they went out there for the Field of Dreams game.
Oh, that was huge.
And the whole,
Yankees versus the White
I
Sox, and it was a good
thank
game
you
that night. It was a good game with a walk-off by the wrong team, but it was a good game.
by the right team. Anyway, I'm kidding.
Okay, let's not get into that. If you want to start doing that, you can come to the Baseball Collective on Wednesday night. We can get into it.
Oh man, don't get me started, man. But anyway, like
Not to
I
divert,
just
but so just for the record, you're a White Sox fan?
no, actually, I'm a Cubs fan.
Either
That's why
way,
I
sounds
said
like you need to come through. But okay, back to the films.
yes. I'll come. I used to come to a lot of the sports rooms before, but I just I gotta live a life anyway. But the point is, I just didn't. I don't know. I just didn't connect to this film. I think his the other two baseball films that you mentioned that he did, of course, Field of Dreams and For the Love of the Game. I think those are better. Um, but yeah, there are some articles out there right now about Bull Durham and the anniversary. And for anyone who hasn't seen it, it is worth watching it. I just didn't connect with it myself personally. Did anyone else watch this film?
Sounding like no, perhaps.
Pardon me. Yes, I saw it in theaters. I'm eating a Hershey's bar. I'm sorry.
No, that's more important, Mark. That's more important. Um, if for folks who like don't care about baseball, just watch the film anyway. It actually it does encapsulate like why people love baseball. It's okay. Don't if you don't care about baseball, it is it the romance part. It's a love triangle. I won't give spoilers of the film, but it is worth a watch for sure. This is one of the better sports films. I will say that.
Yeah, this came in very high. One of the best rooms we ever did in the baseball collector was our all-time best baseball movies, and we sort of opened it up to all sports movies. But it was like this marathon countdown, and of course, all of the Kevin Costner entries went high. I think Field of Dreams might have been the highest.
That's another room, David, about what's the best baseball film because Field of Dreams to me is going to be number one
Yeah, I'm gonna
always.
have to go with The Natural.
Oh, David, that's a
I'm gonna
we
have to
don't
go
need
with
to
my
fight right
man Roy
now.
Hobbs.
I'm sorry, the book is better. Yeah, I said it.
Yeah,
Yeah, I said
oftentimes
it.
it is, but just based on what I saw on the screen,
Sir, go back and read the book. Go back and read the book. Go back and
I,
read the
I I
book.
know Roy made a different choice in the end,
I'm
and
not even talking
I
about
actually
the
had meant.
ending. I'm not even talking about go back
Okay.
and read. This is why we need to do a room about book adaptations and like best and worst. And I know, Brendan, we don't do rooms anymore. We did lists, but like honestly, go back and read the book, David. I've read the book twice. Watch the movie twice.
All
Okay.
right. All right. It is on there. I might have to just Kindle that or whatever, but that has been on the list, so I will let you know when I've checked that off.
Interesting. Yeah, The Natural. Yeah, that might be my pick for one of the best baseball movies. And for some strange reason, I had to read the book in school, and I don't think it was a age appropriate book, if I recall correctly. It's a dark book. Maybe it should have been, if you were faithful in adaptation, it probably would be an R-rated movie, um, potentially. I'm not sure what the natural rating was, but anyway, yeah, they are very different.
Dang, R rating for the
Different.
book. I guess I really got to dive into that. That's way different from the story that we got on screen.
Yeah, Brendan's right. The book's not. I don't know. I don't remember why that book. I read that book when I was in school as well, but I don't remember when I read it. Um, but yeah, there's parts of it that are not age appropriate if you're a kid to read a book like that.
Good times, baby. The 80s and 90s. I don't know when I read it, but yeah, I was in school. It was like one of the grades. Anyway, which is why, again, as I've said before, that's why I don't read books. I mean, get the book reading out of your system when you're kids, and then just enjoy the movies uh, after your youth. I mean, reading books, that's one of those youthful indiscretions, as far as you know, from my perspective. Anyway, uh,
So it's no longer fundamental, is what you're saying?
it's good. Yeah, it's good for development, and then once you're developed, yeah, yeah,
You're like,
toss
it's
it
good to
away.
know which exit to get off on the highway. Otherwise,
Yeah, yeah. Otherwise, you're just ruining the movies. You're ruining everything. Come on.
All
All right.
right, I just pinged LeVar Burton into the room. Let's see what he has to say. He's
I'm
coming.
glad you brought that up, Mark. please, if you do know LeVar Burton or anybody, ping them in here. I mean, gosh, we're at 88, man. Gosh, how many? I mean, put up all these different headlines for different movies, and it's still we've been on. Well, we're about. Well, this is a 4 hour room. Okay, we're gonna wrap up, but
If I leave and
gosh darn it.
if I leave and come back, will the counter click? Does it
No,
work like
no.
that?
If you
No.
were already here,
Oh,
it does not count. So that it just needs new people.
You're already part of the cumulative number.
mm,
Yes. So anyway, please everybody ping. Maybe we can make one last push for 100 because we're
89.
about to.
89. We're at 89.
Nice. We just need 11 more bodies. Because I think they might want to talk about this final movie. I mean, assuming nobody else has other even more ancient movie anniversaries that that I'm not aware of. But this final picture in our trip down memory lane, at least for the ones that we have charts for, might be telling, very illustrative, appropriate, given that we had The Flash this weekend. Yet another movie that is in line with The Flash mid June. We are celebrating the 40th anniversary of Richard Pryor in Superman 3.
Oh my God! Just hold on. Let me go get my bag of salt to throw at this movie. Ugh.
I feel so bad for Richard. I think I talked about this weeks ago. I found a clip of him on The Tonight Show. So before there was a possibility of him being in Superman 3, Johnny Carson has him on the show, and I cannot remember what the movie was promoting that Pryor was doing, but on his own, completely unprompted, I can't even imagine this came up in rehearsal. He just starts talking about how much he loves the 78 Superman, and he can't shut up about it. And I don't know if that's where seeds were planted or but it's a remarkable moment, and he's so giddy about this movie. He loves it so much, and well, you know the rest. And
Yeah, the scene where he was in Robert Vaughn's penthouse apartment where they had the ski jump set up and he jumps off of it and falls off the roof and lands on the street on his skis with a pink blanket tied around his neck because he was imitating Superman and then just proceeds to cross the street. It's like, okay. This is what I hated about Superman 2, you know. And Superman 3 had another good idea, like the whole thing that you got this synthetic kryptonite which turns Superman dad, which could have been very interesting, but it was just hackneyed.
So, no one's going to bring up the whole thing that happened to the sister in the end with the metal thing, the one that gives many children nightmares when they
Oh
turned the
yeah,
sister
that
into a
was
robot
scary.
lady.
That was scary, especially when she finishes getting robotized or whatever you call it, and her eyes open. It's like, ooh, jump scare.
I've never seen this film, but it sounds terrifying and not in a good way.
Yeah, and then the whole story. What's the Lana, whatever that whole it was a mess, right? Annette O'Toole played the love interest. There was no Lois, or maybe she had like a scene at the beginning. I didn't know. Maybe she just didn't. She came back for Quest for Peace. Margot Kidder. Yeah, yeah. That was Annette O'Toole was the main love interest. So
yeah, the whole thing is a hot mess, Julie. It's maybe worth watching because of that, but it is a hot mess. It's pretty amazing.
Some would say
I
The
still
Flash is
have
a
to
hot mess.
have two.
I would say that Superman 3 is worth seeing. If you do like Superman, if you like Superman 1, Superman 2, not saying it's as good as those, but it might be the third best Superman movie. It's a nice taste of the early '80s there, and does some crazy stuff. Does he get this? Is and I did see this. What is it called? Is it like a different kind of kryptonite? It turns Superman bad,
Right,
and
because they were trying to recreate the formula. Remember the scene? Because Richard Pryor turned out to be some sort of computer mathematical genius that can do anything smarts related, and they were analyzing the Rock, his supercomputer, and there was like a 0.26% unidentified thing, and so he's like, okay, just have that be cobalt or whatever. He just fills it in. Like, what difference will it make? And that's how he ended up with the funny kryptonite that makes Superman do asshole things.
And he pimps out his girlfriend to seduce Superman, or make an exchange. He says, "I'll, you can have me if you go do this bad thing, Superman." So Superman goes and does it, and comes back, and Superman gets laid.
Yeah, and then he turns back good again, and he ghosts her. Right? Because
Yeah,
he
I
goes,
know.
she goes, what about you? He goes, I don't know you, lady. I think that was the exact line. Talk about a cold player
I
with
know.
an S on his chest.
Is it rising up on your list there, Julie?
It's like, do you have your own crib? Do I have my own crib? It's up north. Let's go.
And again, this is the villain sending out his own girlfriend to sleep with Superman.
Yeah, like you really want to get with your girl after she's been with the Man of Steel?
It's late, so we can, say these things. But anyway, it's in the
Hey, I'm
damn
just trying to
movie,
get you
so
over 100.
It's a bit of a flex on the bad guy's part. Like he has that degree of confidence. But I like how he turns good and he ghosts her. That's hilarious. Like that's the good thing to do.
Right, total. I don't know you, lady.
But I
Ouch.
mean, is she like complicit in it all, or is she just like she's just like doesn't know better, or is she like she knows what she's doing?
Uh, no, I don't. If I remember correctly, no, she doesn't have like the evil plan. That's just what she was told to do. Sort of like Valerie Perrine in Superman One.
So she's just like an
That's
airhead drifting. She's just basically a drifting airhead.
although if you remember in the movie, she's just playing Airhead. Remember that? Like she's just pretending to be an airhead because there's a scene where they're talking about some finance thing, and she gives like this answer, and Robert Vaughn's sister looks at her like, "How do you know that?" And then she realizes she forgot herself. And she starts acting ditzy again.
Okay, so she knows what she's doing.
Right. But still,
She has
she's
she
not
has
like
agency.
evil incarnate, like like the other guys have this plan for domination or whatever. No, that's not her.
But even in 78 Superman, Miss Tessmacher and Otis knew what Luthor was up to. And they were working with him. She was the one who had, you know, doubts and then started crushing on Superman. So yeah, it's a little bit different there. Good girl turns, I mean, bad girl makes a turn and goes good. But yeah,
Well, as it turns out, Miss Tessmarker saved the state of California, right? Right? 'Cause she's the one that dove in and took the kryptonite off of him so he could get busy,
that's
save
right.
everybody.
That's right. And I always felt bad for Otis that he never got his Otis moment.
Otisburg.
Otisburg, that's it.
Otisburg. Yeah, Superman was great. And I was, what, 10 years old when that came out? It was perfect. I love that.
And there a scene where Superman fights himself in a junkyard, right?
Absolutely. Yes, 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 yes. Which could have been, that was lacking too. But yes, that was the showdown, and he did. The good Superman defeated the evil Superman and rose from the rubble, literally, to his old self.
Absolutely. So Julie, have we sold you on this picture, Superman 3? I mean, don't believe the headline saying it's the worst. See it and judge for yourself. Come
Oh no,
on, there's so
Quest
much
for Peace
spicy
is the
material
worst.
here.
Quest for Peace is the absolute worst.
Right. But I'm just trying to see if we're reaching anyone who has
Like
not
if I
seen.
was John Cryer, I wouldn't have showed my face until, well, I guess he got lucky with Pretty in Pink, but it's like, dude, just sit down until Two and a Half Men rolls around. You need to take a seat for that one.
Right.
Quest for Peace.
Right. Well, yeah, he made good with Two and a Half Men, that's for sure. But as far as Superman 3, are we swaying anyone who has not seen Superman 3 after hearing all these lurid details of this picture? Do you want to see it now?
Hold. Go ahead, Mark.
I was going to say, I think Retro either wants to come up or he wants to see it. I don't know how to read the emojis anymore. Go ahead, Spear.
What's up? Yeah, yeah, I'll see it. Why not?
Superman 3.
Just curiosity's sake. If I could see the Flash, I could see that.
Um, I could say, from instance, Superman 3 is a lot of fun if you can excuse the Richard Pryor parts in there. Um, Literally made no sense of casting him in it. I guess because he was the most popular thing at that time. But the Christopher, this is probably like Christopher Reeve's best performance as Superman, in my honest opinion. The duality of him switching from being good Superman to bad Superman, and I yeah, I mean, I don't know what to feel, but nah, this is not the worst one from the Christopher Reeve films. I think Quest for Peace is the probably the worstest one, but this one is,
Absolutely, question.
yeah, but this one is, I say this is probably Reeve's best performance as Superman without Gene Hackman in the movie, without Margot Kidder in there. He definitely led this movie very gracefully, and the duality that he plays in this film is really good. Probably the best that you ever see a superhero film of a character playing the same type of character, just different. But yeah, that's all I got for you from the Superman 3. I can't say anything else.
And it's the closest that any of the movies have ever played. Or if you know in the comic books the whole idea of Bizarro World and Bizarro Superman, and talk about a multiverse. The, for a while, and this grew out of the crap of the 50s. I think it's that early where there is this alternate universe called, and it's labeled Bizarro World, and everything is the opposite of or the reverse of. So not only is Bizarro Superman essentially evil, he's also incredibly stupid. Um, so I'm glad they didn't quite go there. But yeah, kind of, I agree with you, Spear. It is a good performance. He's a good actor.
He's a phenomenal actor.
Still my favorite Superman.
I know, man. It's really hard to top him, bro. It's that Julia Art training that he got, and just his depiction of Superman was just so charismatic, so real, so convincing. Didn't seem fake at all. It just oozed just everything. Just a really good Superman, and still to this day, out of all the Supermans, nothing quite tops that first Superman movie or the second one at that. Not the Dick Lesnar one, the Richard Donner cut that I liked a lot. That
Yeah,
really,
that's what I still got to see, the Donner cut, because that Hard Day's Night director came in with all the little stunt gags. And we talked about this before. I said it looked like outtakes from the Benny Hill show. It was just ridiculous, like in this whole action evil versus good showdown, and you got all these little physical pranks going down. It was just, yeah, I got to see the Donner cut because I hear very good things about it.
the Donner cut is phenomenal. And when I saw, it, I was like, "This is the movie they should have put out." Um, yeah. And if y'all look at my PTR, that's the Superman movie that we never got, unfortunately. And this is a salute to the Flash for having him in the movie.
I was just gonna bring that
Can you
up.
guys visualize Nicolas Cage as Superman? Because from the first time that ever was a thing that it came out that he was supposed to be, to all the time that's been circulating, I can't picture it. Maybe the only way for me to picture it is to actually see it and like it, but I can't. I
I
don't. Plus,
just
who knows how he would play it? I can't even picture it.
I just want to say that there's a bit of a story behind that Superman Lives movie with Nicolas Cage, if anyone knows. Apparently, they wanted to make this movie, like, the person in charge said that he wanted him to not fly and not wear the costume, and that there needed to be a huge spider at the end of the movie that Superman fights. Clearly, they didn't go with that, but what they did with that story, they put it in Wild Wild West. I just
Oh, I didn't even catch that.
And that's why you see that spider in the Flash movie. Sorry for those who didn't see it.
I've heard that story about the mechanical spider that ends up in Wild Wild West.
Yeah.
I've heard that. Yeah.
It was just cool to see that because I felt like I was the only one in the theater that noticed that, like, oh, they actually did the giant spider thing.
No,
But
I've seen the documentary where that was mentioned, so even I knew about it. But
yeah,
it was cool to see. That one was supposed to be written by Kevin Smith, the Nicolas
yeah,
Cage Superman. Yep.
that's where I heard it from. He did like some press for something and he mentioned that story. But looking at that spider in the movie, I don't know. Maybe it could have worked.
I still like Henry Cavill. That's my second
Yes,
favorite
I
Superman.
liked him. People don't give that Man of Steel movie enough credit. I mean, I was just happy that he wasn't just saving people from natural disasters like in the Batman Returns movie. I like that they brought a villain that, can go toe to toe with Superman in a way that was exciting and new. So it was cool. And Michael Shannon was amazing as
Nah, my only problem with Man of Steel is this. I just wish if they had cut from him like getting discovered by the cancer and go through all that, if they just had him just already as Superman and Zod came into Earth, I think the movie would have just worked out better if they had skipped over that part. That's my only gripe about Man of Steel. But yes,
Wait,
and
skipped over the whole coming of age, growing up parts.
yeah, just skip it. Just skip it. They if they just gonna just go straight to Zod, just skip all that part, just have him already be Superman, and Zod just so happens to come to Earth.
See, it's interesting that you say that because
yeah.
some of those scenes with Kevin Costner and the young Clark Kent, when he and with Diane Lane, with the young Clark Kent, when he's trying to grapple with the powers and not see everything and not be seeing X-ray all the time and basically having an anxiety attack, or when he was trying to defend his friend and he accidentally showed a little superhuman strength, and his father's like, "Hey, what we talk about?" I did enjoy those scenes. Like it was like, damn, like, oh, well, how would you be if you were a kid and you could do all this stuff? So I don't know. I kind of like those scenes, but I
Yeah,
hear what
that's
you're saying.
why. Yeah, that's why you have to give him more credit. I mean, I didn't like the way his father died. I would have liked him to have the heart attack, because it would have shown that as strong as he is, or he thinks he is, there's things that he can't stop, and that would have been much better story for that Superman.
Yeah, for those who are new to the room, Man of Steel is also celebrating its 10th anniversary. So DC and Warner Brothers have a habit of putting these movies out in mid June. So The Flash was following the pattern. Even though the week before we had Transformers and the week before that we had Spider Verse, two movies pretty much targeting the same audience or very close, and that could not have helped the Flash's cause, but I guess they thought that they were the 100-pound gorilla or 800-pound, I don't know, whatever. They thought they were the gorilla. They thought they were the big dog that everyone else had to bow to. But it turns out the big dog was a spider, and not the spider that Nick Cage fights. Anyway, a different one.
Yeah.
Hey, what did the first Superman make opening weekend?
Ooh, good question, David. That was actually a record breaker. The first Superman broke the opening weekend record, or broke the weekend record. I have. I used to maintain that list, but it is one of those things that has been
And I'm just asking because
lost.
as we're talking about it, I'm thinking back to
Yeah.
when the first Superman came out. I just remember it being huge. I mean, we talk about how these studios try to ramp up these movies, the superhero, like, but that Superman one, I guess, in a world where you don't have like 18 bazillion superhero movies existing already and coming a year after Star Wars, and just the pictures they'd released of Christopher Reeves. And then I remember the couple of scenes that they would cut from the movie as, teasers and stuff. It was just huge. It was, I mean, even being, like I said, I was 10 years old when that came out. And I just have this memory of it just being, and not that I wasn't mad at it, but just every, just hugest thing. So that's why I was asking about the
Well,
box
your
office.
your memory serves you well because Superman from 1978 came out December 15th, 1978. It was an enormous movie at the box office, a box office monster. I mean, this is why we're still, we're in the superhero world. If this movie doesn't become a blockbuster, then they're gonna shy away from doing superhero movies. But this is just one of the.
Right, with the Marlon Brando thing, just all
Yeah.
sorts of aspects of this thing just made this thing just bigger.
Right, right. It opened to $7.5 million on the weekend of December 15th, 1978, but only at roughly 500 theaters. So they released movies a little bit differently sometimes back then. But it would later grew into New Year's weekend when it did over $10 million, which was the first or the biggest weekend ever at that point. They did ten
And
point
the
four
ticket
million in
price
its
then
third
was
weekend.
like $5. How much
Oh
was the
no, it
ticket
was like two
price?
something. It was like two
Right.
something. So yeah, that was the record for a weekend gross for Superman. And then Superman 2 creates the June paradigm, comes out June 19th, 1981. So it's the 42nd anniversary of Superman 2 today. We don't, again, it's 42nd. I guess it's an even number, but it's not those intervals of five. But anyway,
0 or 5, 0 or 5.
yeah, exactly. So that sets the paradigm for Superman. It sets the mold because that debuts to 14.1 million in June of 81, breaking the weekend record again. So people, if you don't know, we're telling you, Superman was a thing, an enormous blockbuster. Both Superman 1 and Superman 2. Superman 3, not so much. It takes another step down here. It does open to over $13 million on this weekend 40 years ago. But if you adjust for ticket price inflation, that's at least as much as The Flash. So, again, for further perspective about The Flash, even Superman 3 probably did better. And Superman 3 ultimately grossed $60 million domestically. It was the
Did that
12th.
box office fall off quick? Because I just remember such bad word of mouth
Right.
on Superman 3.
Relatively speaking, yes. So usually at time, if the picture opened at $13 million, it was likely headed north of 60 million. So this one burnt out at the $60 million point, was the 12th highest grossing picture from 1983, just behind National Lampoon's Vacation. So just ahead of The Big Chill. So Superman 3 was slided at number 12 for the year, but that is a big come down for the Superman franchise. And if this movie had clicked, done bigger business, then maybe Quest for Peace might not have happened, or at least it would have been a better production. It would have kept its studio, right?
It seems like the late 70s were really big, had really great movies like Star Wars, Superman, and then I think a Star Trek movie came out around that time.
The
So
first one, Star Trek,
Yeah,
came out in
that movie
'79, and that was not good. That was
wasn't
sitting in the
good.
theater for 90 minutes waiting for something to happen.
I
I'm like,
wouldn't
Yeah,
agree with that.
I was like, now,
I'm
now, now they came correct with Wrath of
I'm
Khan,
sure
Ultra
the hype
correct,
was high though.
but yeah, because there was big hype because it was Star Trek, it was this, and that's how I rolled into the theater. 11 years old now, and it's like, oh, you
Yeah.
kidding me, right?
But you were 11 in 79?
Yeah, I was born in '68.
You sound like you were born in 90. I'm sorry.
Nah,
You sound young. You sound very young, man. That's cool. That's good.
thank you. It's 1968, kid.
Sound great.
yeah. Star Trek: The Motion Picture would have been a great hour of Star Trek television had they not redesigned everything. Superman was huge. Yeah, ticket prices were what they were, adjusted for inflation. They rolled out films slower, but it was everywhere. The tagline, "You will believe a man can fly." And I saw it a few days after it opened, and then my entire family went Christmas Day. For a while, for a few years, we were going to movies on Christmas Day, which is kind of a nice thing. And so the tagline was Disney reissued in theaters Mary Poppins and borrowed that. "You'll believe a woman can fly" in some of their advertising. It's true.
Yeah, but didn't they already see a Superman fly with George Reeves Superman?
Well, that
Yeah,
was
but we
TV.
didn't believe it. Now the effects were way better, and now we believe
Oh, okay.
it.
I mean, that was TV, and I swear to God, if you watch those
Like you would see the shot where he
episodes,
jumps out of the window, right? And then it would cut to him, I guess, on the wires with the fake clouds and the same. It was just funny, but I still loved
it
it.
was
Yeah.
That
yeah
Apparently it was
totally
like
like after
the
school
effect
memories.
Yeah, from
when
what
you
I
looked
learned,
at him,
it was like a box he was on, like he was
Yeah,
it's
planking,
flat.
and then yeah, it was planking, and basically it was just CGI.
blanket,
That's why his stomach was like a
exactly,
little
dude.
flat.
Blanket.
Damn, George Reeves invented planking. Who knew?
Well, I got one better for you. If you look at clips, if you look at the serial of Kirk Allen's Superman from, I guess Republic did that. I don't know, from the 40s. Um, and this, I swear to God, and it's jolting. There are shots of him flying where it is an animated cartoon version.
Yes, I saw that one too.
And it's, I can't even believe that could have been acceptable to the human eye in 48 or whatever. It's just so jolting. And I've been flashing pictures all night of the Fleischer animated Superman, which
Oh,
are
I love those films. Those were ahead
those
of
are
its time.
beautiful. Those are great. Yeah,
That animation was ahead of its time. I don't know if it got the praise it did at that time, but I praise it a lot now.
and they've all been restored by this group restoring Fleischer animation. So yeah,
Yeah.
the history of flight, Superman.
If you wander off the TikTok long enough, like I do, you'll find videos of that sometimes.
And that's the other great trivia thing. Superman flies because of the Fleischer cartoons.
Yes, yeah, I
Because
remember. Yeah, you
in the
got it.
comic books and on radio, he's still leaping buildings at a single bound, but it just was let's make him fly, and they did.
Oh, is
Yeah,
that what that is?
yeah, I
My
think
first Superman was
think
George Reeves, but oh, that totally
yeah,
makes
I think
sense.
the reason for that was because it was easier to draw him than to keep drawing him leaping over things.
Maybe I think they thought it was just cooler if he flies.
No, that too. But I guess it worked in whatever in both favors. Like instead of just drawing him kneeling down and jumping up over something, we just have him fly over it.
But like just to hear you guys talk about the special effects, like when Superman 1 came out, right? And you get through the whole first part of young Clark Kent, and when he gets to New York City, Metropolis, excuse me, finally, and that first night when he's just out flying around, and just the way they showcase, like it was just like that's what they call movie magic, because you were just sitting there like, wow. I mean, just and they still look. I've watched it, and a lot of those effects still look pretty great, But when they showcased it like that, and he's flying, and you see the Manhattan skyline, or the Statue of Liberty, or the bridges, or whatever, and he's just seamlessly, it was magic.
It had its charm too that we never saw from Superman, especially from Lois Lane, which I liked. Like it was just a personality, a breath of fresh air that I think no one was ready for in '78.
Hey, everybody. Um, the thing about that first Superman movie is that um, origin stories are crucial. And by that time, they had what, like 40 years, different like tweaks of the Superman origin story. And in DC Comics, previously National Comics, they had reworked it, tweaked it. And I think that's what that movie got really well. And plus a little ad lib and everything. Origin stories are huge, and then as you see in all these little films made about superheroes since that time, a bad origin story or leaving key details out leads them to unfortunately remake the films again, and which I hate. It's just like, get the origin story right. Just don't take so many liberties like they do, because I mean, think about it. The comics, I mean, 40 years of comics, you got all that great stuff
Bell
to
bottoms.
draw from.
David, I'd like to ask you, like, what was that theater experience like watching Superman in '78?
Like I said, it was really like movie magic, and this is right around the time I could start to go to movies by myself or with friends in the daytime in the neighborhood. And so, like I said, with all the hype, and now you're talking to a kid who, there have been no superhero movies. I've watched Batman after school and George Reeves Superman After School. So when you come with this 1978 with all the bells and whistles of the time, technology wise, and all the harnesses and all the things that they did photography, the way they would shoot him to make him fly, it was just, and plus the fact that they did all this with a movie that was good. And where we spoke about a villain, Gene Hackman, great. Even Otis, like we mentioned, Otis, that was just like the comic relief and just the contrast with the scenes with Hackman, great. Even Perry White, whatever, great. The whole thing was great. But of course, the main thing is that we nailed it with Christopher Reeve. And so it's just like the tagline said, you'll believe a man can fly. So you put all that together, and then we haven't even mentioned the music, right? John Williams, like,
Yeah. How was that crowd though? Were they loud and like just clapping or
yeah,
something?
yeah, it was cheering, like it sounds all like, hackneyed to say, but yeah, there was like, ooh, like when these things would happen. Like even I just had that up as my gif. Like remember in the end, after Lois dies in the desert and
Yeah.
Superman finds her, and then he flips out. Like when he goes, like it was more like a gasp, not like necessarily a cheer, but there was definitely an audible audience emotional reaction.
Yeah.
Between like, and it was just a great shot movie wise.
My experience with this, I saw it after a couple of days after it opened, and like I said, we saw it Christmas Day. The theater that I saw it on still saw it in still had a fabric curtain that opened, and they kept that, I think, until the early 80s, maybe by 85, and then it was gone. They did a refurbishment and they had a screen but no curtain anymore. And so it's the kind of movie that, as a kid, I've seen movies and I've loved them and had a lot of fun, maybe gone back and seen them again. But this curtain opens, and we all know how this film opens with the little 4x3 and the little girls talking about the Daily Planet. We're looking at it in 1938. And then it expands into that title sequence. And you didn't even see those kind of graphics quite on television yet. And the names of the actors, with the John, and that's the whole thing, David. The John Williams score right at the beginning teases, boom, 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 boom. It doesn't
Yeah,
go
yeah, the
full
way
yet.
it comes in just like you did. Yeah,
And Marlon Brando's name and this name swooshes by. You didn't even see that kind of advanced graphics for text on TV yet. And it was just, you just knew, and the audience was glued. I remember those moments so palpably. Star Wars, Alien, this picture, even 76's King Kong had this excitement about it. Regardless of what you think about Gillerman's Kong, the De Laurentiis King Kong. But yeah, it was a really great time for fantasy pictures. It was really, really great.
yeah, man.
Anything to
Just
escape the dreary 70s.
Oh,
and
they were that
And the
dreary.
well,
and I bet the concessions were
okay.
still a ripoff.
Um, so as somebody who worked in movie theaters in the 70s, so I saw the King Kong on opening night. I saw Star Wars on opening night. I saw Superman on opening night. Um, it was all epic. I thought that King Kong was really good. I think it gets bashed a lot, but
I'm gonna have to raise my hand on that one, Michael, because I have said in this room that is like I look at it now and I kind of looked at it then like I can't believe this movie came out just a year before Star Wars because this Kong is so bad.
no,
You
yeah,
know,
we had that
it's
conversation,
just
and I
so.
get it, but it was an epic film, and
No doubt,
uh,
and then I was into it. Okay, World Trade Center instead of Empire Style. I mean, I was with the upboot, the '70s reboot, but just in certain scenes, it was just like, okay, we're gonna move the eyes now. Okay, now the arm, like they couldn't do them at the same time.
That's the one with the twin towers, right?
Right.
the ending is actually pretty classic, though. I mean, with Kong lying there just before he dies. Yeah, I'm not going to defend that Kong too much. All I want to say is about the '70s is that um, it was an interesting period of time where like in 3 years, you have these uh, epic stories being redone, and but fast forward to now. So I just saw The Flash last night, and I liked it. I did like it, and I thought it was a nice uh, DC spin on the whole multiverse, whatever. But I got to be honest with you, it's like, what other characters do they keep doing over and over and over again? I mean, I'm getting tired of all these Superman, Batman, Spider Mans. It's been done to death. It's like, put it to rest for a while. Like, and I've said this before in these Marvel DC movies. The gold mine that has not been touched is Jack Kirby. For those of you who know the comics, Jack Kirby's fourth World Series in late '60s, early '70s for DC, where he did the New Gods, Mister Miracle, the Forever People. That is amazing, and if you know about it, you know how much that influenced Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars, a big part of the mythology was actually lifted from Jack Kirby, and I would love to see that mind, and just go for it. No more Superman movies, no more Batman, no more Spider Man. It's just, how many times are we going to do this? It's
until we're sick
but
of it.
you know what? I
I,
I wouldn't see the Flash simply because of what I had heard, but I haven't seen any Marvel films outside of No Way Home in the last few years, and I'm tired of it. But I might be in the minority on that.
No, no, I have totally fallen off pace with the Marvel movies. And at one point, when I was gonna try and catch up in order, I had my friend write them out for me. Like, okay, wait, in what order should I watch these movies? And then I never got rolling, and they just kept coming out. So I sort of have given up on it unless I just happen upon it, and I just will not care about what I'm supposed to know or what was in the bonus scene at the end of the last one. So I'm all out.
yeah, I really agree about mining, not mining, that just sounds nasty and not creative, but really going to Jack Kirby and Jack Kirby's work. I think there's a marvelous, I think marvelous films can be made from that, no pun intended. And even later, like as derivative as Machine Man is, I think there are things about that could be done. And just a comment about that explosion of those epic, feel good, wondrous. What's the old cinefantastic sense of wonder? Fred Clark's magazine. Those films just hit because the first half of the '70s, and Brandon, you nailed it. These were dark times, and all of our science fiction was dystopian. You had the tail end of the 20th Century Fox Planet of the Apes films. You had Soylent Green. You had Omega Man. You just had very dark, dour, dystopian science fiction. Logan's Run, and then it changes mid decade into a really wonderful way, uh, an escapist way. Good
Yeah,
stuff.
you know
Great
what?
room.
I'm glad you brought that up about the dystopian. But then again, um, that had never really been done like they did it in the '70s,
Oh no, not
and
at all.
so
Even
it's really impressive run of dystopian science fiction films. And but you're correct. After a certain point, it was time to go big, go feel good, and do that kind of thing. And so I think it happened in the right sequence.
yeah, and there was some good science fiction. I mean, Carpenter's Dark Star, Trumbull's Silent Running. So there was stuff that was getting a little bit more serious. Effects were getting a little bit much better, particularly with Trumbull's film. Coming out of a very comic booky, bubblegummy weirdness of the late '60s science fiction, which I don't lump in. I love the very Franklin Schaffner's Planet of the Apes from, what was that, '68. But other than that, you had some goofy stuff in the '60s, and I'm not talking about Japanese monster movies, but Western. science fiction really found a great place and then made this great shift mid decade. Um, and
You
here we
just
are
gave me a
with
great idea, Mark. Not that I'm a director, but it would be really kind of cool if somebody did the ultimate multiverse, which is to go back across different production companies and grab Ultraman and Speed Racer and Astro Boy. So all the Japanese stuff, mix it with the late '60s camp Batman, and then throw it in with Star Wars and that kind of stuff.
That
Because
sounds like a Ready Player One type of brew, pop cultural brew.
well, it would be great. I mean, because that's basically what the Flash teased at by grabbing George Reeves and Christopher Reeve and all that. They kind of teased at these things, but just doing a little snippet. Here's a little visual of it. But if you could actually pull it off, which I think they could, it would be really fun. Because that's what the multiverse is right now, right? It's animation and live action as well.
Yeah.
Can you guys name what you feel is, or maybe not one, but okay, two titles then of the worst superhero movie ever?
Jeez, I don't know. I
Does anything stick out in anybody's mind in
For
particular?
me, the one that comes out first is Eternals. It was just, compared to the previous Marvel movies that were, home runs, it was just not there at all. Too many characters. One of them really did nothing. And it was just, I don't know, it just wasn't landing right anywhere. It didn't really have a clear-cut story, and the ending was just confusing.
nothing jumps out theatrically immediately. I automatically bounce to 70s and early 80s TV as just being some of the most jaw-dropping atrocious shit I've ever seen in the larger superhero universe. I mean,
I love how you said that. Just
You
jaw-dropping,
didn't
atrocious
like
shit.
that TV Spider Man? What was the Who's the guy that played Nick whatever that
Nicholas
played Spider Man on
Yeah,
TV?
wasn't it from the
Nicholas
80s?
Hammond. Nicholas Hammond, bless
Yes,
him.
yes, I love that. Are you kidding? But again, I'm 9, I'm 10, or whatever, 8, whatever. So I
On
was all in with the cheese. It was cheesy, but I was all in.
on TikTok they have this guy who narrates old TV shows like that, like Wonder Woman and Spider-Man. He just
Yes, and the
recaps a scene.
$6 million man, all of that. Understood?
Yeah,
I
and
was all in.
he does it in in the 70s black exploitation narrator voice, and it's hilarious.
That sounds
It's-
funny.
Now you're bringing me back, boy. $6 million Man, Kung Fu.
That was the
Um,
coolest shit ever, Steve. I remember I got that doll action figure
you know what?
Christmas one year.
When Kung Fu came out, all the kids were talking about it. I mean, it was like every single week. That's all you could talk about.
And then by the time the announcer was Steve Austin, man, I was fucking parked in front of the TV. No question.
And I ain't gonna lie, I enjoyed some of the 70s stuff. I watched it. I watched $6 Million Man. I watched The Incredible Hulk.
The
I watched Wonder
Incredible
Woman.
Hulk was great, and not only just the Hulk segments, but whatever I think about that show, I just am blown away by how emotionally involved I was because it was so depressing, right? Like Bill Bixby would go in, he'd make some connections with people, then this Hulk thing, and this Jack McGee reporter is sweating him, and then the Hulk comes in, blows everything up, and then at the end of the episode, he's walking down the road alone with that piano music coming in. Like that shit was like it was good, but it was like, oh my god, this is such a bummer.
It,
Like I was so into that
look,
character.
it was The Fugitive and Touched by an Angel at the same time. It was,
Right, right.
it was serious. But even then, uh, I guess I was a little disappointed when what he looked like when Bigfoot showed up and got a little
Wait, with
ridiculous.
the $6 million? Yeah,
Anyway,
that's a classic episode with the, when they go through
yes, it
the ice
is.
tunnel.
Yes, it
I've
is.
gone through that thing at Universal Studios, by the way, and you do get dizzy. That was great. I know you're not about to like bust on Sasquatch. Was that Andre the Giant that played him?
No, no.
Oh, the guy that played Jaws in The Spy Who Loved Me.
Richard Kyle. Yeah,
Yeah.
I knew,
Wow.
yeah, I knew Richard briefly. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
toward the end of his life. I've got a
Mm.
bunch of friends who were Bond actors, and I knew him the last 5 years of his life
He's
casually.
in my favorite Roger Moore Bond, Spy Who Loved Me.
Oh, that's my favorite Roger Moore too. Yeah.
Classic.
Speaking of the '70s, that's '77. So, that was a good time for fantasy pictures.
I mean, that's
That's
when
my
you're talking.
favorite. That's my
No, go ahead.
favorite fantasy Bond film, Spy Who Loved Me.
Mm,
Just with the
yeah,
outside
well,
thing. Yeah.
that was the Bond that I grew up with, I guess, right? That was the Bond that was the active Bond of my childhood. Those were the movies that were coming out. But when you talk about like we were talking about Superman and the impact, it's funny. I got the TV on and Saturday Night Fever on. I'm just thinking about like the first Oscars I can remember watching was the 1978 Oscars, and I just remember the commercial had like these clips of Star Wars and Annie Hall and Saturday Night Fever, and we've had this conversation in this space about you know now like you have your Oscar films and then you have your box office film. But like just when I'm thinking about those times growing up, like those were popular, big box office, popular, not snooty movies, and just very,
So,
yeah, like you were saying, Mark, a very exciting time.
so talking about Jury 70s to me anyway, Annie Hall, Manhattan. But again, I wasn't an adult yet. That was dreary. That was depressing. That was
Dude,
like
I wasn't into
a
Woody Allen at that age myself. I just knew everybody else was on his dick, but I didn't. Yeah, okay.
yeah. I mean, just as a kid, I was like, "Is this what it means to be an adult? Is this what we're going to be doing? Talking about this garbage?" And as it turns out, in 2023, it seems like, yeah,
I think when I was young, the only one that I ever really liked was Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex, but whatever. We're afraid to ask.
yeah,
But other than
yeah.
that,
When he was, he was more about slapstick and stuff like that. I like that. Obviously he's had multi all sorts of changes, and then in my opinion, again, he got back on
hey,
track, and he's had
Michael, do you
so
want
many
a
many
baseball
good films.
collective tie-in?
What's that?
Woody Allen's nephew was my classmate in high school. We both ran on the 4x1, and Woody took him to the fucking World Series game where Reggie hit the 3 home runs.
Oh, really?
And that's all dude could talk about, as I would be the next day at school.
Wow, that's the ultimate
Yeah,
game to go to.
exactly. He went with Woody.
Hmm.
Back to movies.
Well,
Hey,
Brandon,
Brandon, your mark.
I started to listen to your replay from yesterday about the Flash, and I got busy, had to work and all that stuff. So, what's been the consensus so far? No spoilers for those who haven't seen it about the Flash. Are people liking it? Not liking it? It sounded like you didn't really like it, but I just want to hear your thoughts on it.
Oh, sure. I'm probably in the middle. I mean, I didn't like, maybe it's like a 5 or a 6. I mean, I don't usually rate movies, but I recommend it if you like this sort of thing, if you like DC to some degree. But yeah, it's a flawed movie. It's a Franken movie. So I guess by Franken movie standards, it's a thumbs up. By regular movie standards, maybe not so much. So, uh, but I think in general, a lot of people liked it. A lot of people hate it. It has a B cinema score, which means word of mouth is at the very least mixed. So knowing that going in, if you do plan to see it, that you may not like it. So hopefully you have an A list or a coupon or something like that. Probably the most useful way of rating a movie probably would be like, what should the ticket price be for this movie? So, I mean, hey, if you could get a ticket for $3, maybe it's worth it. But I wouldn't recommend paying full price for it. So
What did you like about the film?
I like the the comedy elements, the some of those scenarios. I think the some of the performances were fine. I like the just this the sense of humor aspect of it. I'm kind of easy to please with a comic book movie. I like a fun movie. I mean, I even kind of like Shazam too, as maligned as that picture is. Kind of put this on the same level. You know, when I think of a comic book movie, I think it should be fun. I mean, that's why I was saying, hey, you guys should see Superman 3 because at the very least, it's kind of a fun movie. So I just have a different standard for that. So I did like that aspect, and I think it works on it. I like the Back to the Future references, but it's like and that sort of thing. But if you're referencing other movies, then maybe your movie is not the best. So it's just it's kind of an enjoyable experience. It's too long as these things always are. There's some dodgy CG. You may not. I mean, I'm not a fan of what they did with Batman. But some of the performances work. I mean, uh, yeah, it's one of those movies. There's so much to say and so little to say because it's a very derivative movie and it's a mess of a movie. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, Michael.
No, it does. Because one of the things I appreciated about the Tom Holland Spider-Man's was it took it back to the essence of the original Spider-Man comics. Uh, where they really drilled into him being a teenager and insecure and a little bit more humor and what I liked about the Flash was the humor. I liked the fact that they made him, very very quirky and and played off of that. That to me is one of the problems that I have with all these superhero movies is that started taking themselves way too seriously, and and it was a lot of in joke reference or like in crowd references. If you'd seen all the other movies, you get it, and that's what's funny to you. And sometimes you just need to make a movie in and of itself, and it needs to have a little bit of fun. And I felt The Flash kind of had that.
Oh, cool. So you did see it as well. Sorry, I wasn't clear if you had seen
Yeah,
it
I
or not.
saw it last night, and so yeah, like I said, I thought of the DC movies, it was the closest that they've come yet to doing anything like a Spider-Man. But Tom Holland's Spider-Man, more fun.
Ah, now hey, that's a great point, and maybe part of its downfall, it looking too similar to Spider-Man. We just had another Spider-Verse movie a couple of weeks ago, and certainly I would say Spider-Man: No Way Home did it better. So whatever this is doing, I think overall No Way Home did it better. And I guess the other thing I did appreciate also was some of the acting, some of the scenes. I mean, I think a lot of people were touched by the scene with the mom. I'm not going to spoil it, but yeah, I mean, some of it's in the trailer. You know where it goes, and some of that's effective. But gosh, yeah, gosh darn it, it is such a
I
mess.
agree with everything you're saying. I felt the same way.
Cool, yeah.
I hadn't seen any of the trailers prior to seeing the movie. I just read a few things, but then I find out today that they put a whole bunch of spoilers in the trailers, which I think is kind of stupid. If you're going to do something like they did in their version of the multiverse, don't put it in the trailer. Let it be a surprise. Let it be an Easter egg that everybody comes out of the theater talking about, and then they can recommend the movie to other people.
Yeah,
I
I was.
totally hear. Oh,
Oh, sorry. Yeah, David, I was about to say. I think they should have kept Supergirl out of the trailer. I mean, if you need Batman to sell the picture, fine, but have Supergirl be a surprise, and then people wouldn't be so confused or enraged or whatever, trepidatious about the prospects of a Supergirl when what they really want is Henry Cavill. But if she's a surprise, like a bonus for the movie, then might have gone over better.
right. And I would agree with that. And I hate when marketing and promotion just get in the way of you receiving the actual art. And this is not film, but it happened just recently. Now I don't watch the Sex in the City. It's not a reboot, but whatever. What do you call it? Continuation series, whatever it is. And I don't watch it, but I don't know if you guys caught it, right? But Sarah Jessica Parker and Kim Cattrall have had this, like, I guess at this point, decades long beef, and Kim Cattrall's not it. And then now apparently she's going to be in it, and there was all this press that came out like they made up she's gonna, and I just was thinking to myself, if I was a watcher of this show, I'd be like, couldn't you guys just shut up and just let it happen and just get all the ooh like, then when we get it via the story, and wouldn't it serve the story if you didn't just blab to us like, oh, they made up she's going to be in it, it's going to be the last episode of the next season. So I always hate when that commerce and marketing and promotion and teasing um, get in the way of receiving the actual art and the way you take it in.
Spot on. And by the way, I don't know why it just made me think of it. So I'm a big fan of the Succession series, but I didn't watch a single episode of this most recent season that just wrapped up. Just been busy. I'm looking forward to watching it. But the day after the final episode runs, the New York Times puts the spoiler in the headline. And it was like,
They put
why?
it in the headline?
In the headline. Why would you do that? It's the most craziest thing. I almost like
Oh,
unsubscribed right there.
you would think they know better than that.
Well, well, everybody watches Succession on HBO when it's airing. So you're the heathen for not being on
You
top
know
of it.
what? The problem was I watched too many series during the pandemic, and I don't even know where to start to finish these things up. Like, haven't finished Barry. Righteous Gemstones just started again.
Barry was awesome.
There's so many I'm behind in.
For the record, that Succession finale, like, that
No
was good for
spoilers,
me.
please. I'm still watching
That's
it.
all I'm gonna say. I'm just gonna say it was good for me.
Yep, well, those are great points about the foibles of marketing and the foibles of the press here. Gosh, yeah, that is a dereliction of duty on the part of those writers, I would say, of that story you're talking about. Yeah, you hear that, and they'll just randomly do spoilers on things. And you're listening to something totally unrelated, like if I'm listening to a podcast about something else, and they start talking about whatever Succession or something, and then they'll spoil it. I'm not. I'm still on season one, and then I was spoiled for like a certain death that happens in season three. I'm not going to spoil it here, but it's like, wait, what? I'm not even. It's not even a Succession podcast. Why are you talking about this?
Well, do you
Anyway,
know what I've come to do? If there's something, if it's a Netflix show or a HBO show or a movie that is starting to make the promotional rounds, and I've already decided that I am into this and I want to see it, I never read anything about it. Never, never. I don't want to hear red carpet, nothing. I don't want to read anything about it because you guys be killing the story with this promotion. So I just go blackout until I see the actual whatever it is.
I'm with you, but when it's in the headline,
Yeah, that's an
it's
right,
excuse.
or
Like, why do
something.
you think people send out emails with the subject spoiler alert or at the top of the article in boldface or the following paragraph? Like, hello, aren't you the guys supposed to be like the #1 publishing people?
well, it's gotten to a point where the media they want your clicks, so they're willing to spoil things because they're competing with ever more media and I mean Brandon and everybody on stage, we all know this, right? With these superhero movies and everything, there's all these teasers and spoilers out there that by the time the film comes out, 85% of what's in it is already well known if you just Google, right?
I remember I was so pissed because I heard about the end of the Wrath of Khan before I actually saw it. It's like, you mother. Still hit me like a sledgehammer, though, so. But
Yes,
still, I would rather not have heard.
of course, but it's about the journey,
Right,
and
right.
that's why, yeah, it used to be people weren't quite as sensitive about spoilers. In fact, people complain about trailers now, but even back in the day, in the golden age of Hollywood, they would effectively spoil the whole movie too, and sometimes in the trailers. You'd be surprised. It's nothing new. But yeah, I mean, in terms of some of these tricks they play, well, sometimes you could kind of judge it by how desperate they are. So if they're talking about Kim Cattrall coming back to Sex in the City, then maybe they're desperate for ratings for that. Earlier this year with Shazam: Fury of the Gods, that movie wasn't tracking very well, so they let it out of the bag and really put it in the commercials for the movie that Wonder Woman makes an appearance in this movie. Didn't help, but yeah. So you can
Hey, it
measure
helped
the
me. She was awesome.
right. Well, she's only in like for like a couple of seconds in Shazam, but at any
Oh,
rate, it
I'm
would have
sorry. I
been it's
thought you meant
supposed
Supergirl.
right. No. I'm talking about yeah, Shazam, Wonder Woman. It's supposed to be a nice surprise at the end of the movie, but that was spoiled by the company, by the studio, because they were desperate. So, I guess the more desperate they get, the more disclosure there is.
Do you think they put it in her contract where she has to do all these guest appearances? Because it seems like she's in a whole bunch of stuff, right?
You mean Gal Gadot? You mean Wonder
Yeah.
Woman? Ain't that part of the gig,
Well,
right?
yeah, but I
You
mean
know,
that wasn't the way it was in the whole MCU. Um, like where one character just seemed to pop up in every one of the films.
It's probably in their contract somehow, and maybe they have a certain amount of appearances that they have to do, or they're just trying to goose up the numbers. It's not helping though, because look at Shazam and look at the Flash, and on down the line. But yeah, I'm sure there's something. It probably varies person to person, but they probably do try to lock them in for these kinds of appearances. Probably the preset fee, maybe an option. Um, so I wouldn't be surprised. But I hope they don't pay them a fortune because it's really not worth it. I mean, whether it's the Henry Cavill cameo at the end of Black Adam, or the Wonder Woman cameo in Shazam, or all the cameos in The Flash, especially that last one that might have uh, pissed off as many people as it amused, uh, it doesn't help. I mean, you're probably making less money from that than you're spending on getting these people to cameo. I don't know. I don't know how much they cost. I mean, I guess we're not privy to that, but that's it's usually not the juice is not worth the squeeze. There, in other words, typically speaking, it's just something, it's a move of desperation because your movie is not good enough otherwise. I think. Um, and I think we talked about this before, misunderstanding of the fans. I think someone earlier we started talking about how fans, they do, he said, bleep the fans, and there's some truth to that. You should just try to make the best movie you can, and if you do, then the fans will follow. I think the fans get mad when they feel like they're being pandered to, and perhaps I think the Flash is, to a large degree, guilty of a very clumsy pandering.
I I think I know this has been debated ad nauseum, but the fatal flaw with the whole DC or whatever the DCU they're trying to call it is that they were just late. I mean, they did the Superman movie in '79. They did the Batman movie, but there should have been somebody with enough brains early on to realize that it wasn't just Superman and Batman, and they should have explored these other characters. And so that's basically what Marvel got right. Is they had a game plan that they were going to do an Iron Man, they were going to do a Thor, they were going to build these characters and then pull them all together, into the Avengers, Captain America, all that stuff. And so DC just dropped the ball, and they went about it backwards. They came out with the Justice League before they explored Aquaman, Flash, and quite honestly a whole bunch of other characters who were not in the movie version of Justice League, but they could have done if they had thought about it. So DC was just late, and they're still playing catch up. Like that's the negative that I thought is that saw in the Flash is that, like I mentioned earlier, is like uh, took a lot of cues from Spider-Man, not just Spider-Man's character, but also the multiverse.
Yep, yep. The first mover advantage. MCU had it. DC lost it because I mean they're the ones. I mean, partly why we're here today. Superman 78, Batman 89, but in this millennium at least, it's all about the Marvel. So anyway, it's been an interesting conversation. I invite everybody to join the house. And just a programming note: we usually do these shows Mondays at around 5 p.m. Pacific. So we're gonna start to pare these down because I can't. I think we're going on too long. We're wearing out our welcome here sometimes, hogging up the clubhouse for a few hours on Monday nights. So we're gonna try to shorten that up. So if you guys want to be part of the conversation, I do invite everybody to come to the rooms Mondays around 5 p.m. Pacific, and hopefully get some stimulating conversation about the movies going there. And there's the link to the house here, Box Office Revival, movie talk show.
I wasn't here for the beginning, but what were the numbers for Flash, and is it good or
Is it?
bad?
Oh, it's bad. It's bad. Yes, yes. Historically, a historic weekend for flops.
Yeah. And I think I heard you before earlier today. You don't think it was because of Ezra Miller's criminal record, but the movie itself?
Yeah, because I just wonder how much normies are engaged with that. I know it might a small percentage, but I just don't know if it's enough percentage to go from a movie that's going to be $100 million to a movie that's only barely 50 million. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
By the way, it came down to either seeing Elemental or The Flash. So I haven't seen Elemental. I want to see it, but from what you're just saying, that was a flop too.
A historic flop, the worst opening in Pixar history by far.
Really?
Yep.
Have you seen the film?
Not yet.
Wow, that's surprising.
Has anybody on stage seen it?
No, I haven't seen Elemental. But that's surprising that it was a flop for a Pixar movie.
Earlier in the room, Julie had seen it and she said it was good. She was highly recommending it.
Well, yeah. I mean, they pretty much score every time out. Um, as far as like at the theaters, my recommendation is if you have like two or three different cinema chains in your area, see which one has the best rewards program. You could actually we have Icon in the Minneapolis St. Paul area, so um, basically I'm in the rewards program. So I was able to see it in their VIP theater and save $8 and see it for cheap and great experience. So that's my final thought.
That's the way to do it. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Retro David. You have any closing thoughts for the night?
No, just good movie talk. I have not seen either of the films, so but just good gabbing it up. See you guys the next time.
Yeah, likewise, likewise. Oh, by the way, David, do you have any rooms or houses coming up?
Doing the baseball collective. Oh yeah, Michael, you missed it. Julie was in here earlier. Cubs fan.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. She was starting to raise a little baseball beef. But anyway, we got the baseball collective every week, hosted by none other than Michael Patrick, Wednesday nights, 9 p.m. Eastern time. So if you're any type of baseball fan, that is the place to be. The best baseball talk online. So please
And
come
David
through if
is
you're
super
interested.
modest, and he won't acknowledge his role in that. There's no baseball collective without David. So just want to throw that out there. And by the way, Dave, Brandon, I really do appreciate so much what you're doing with these rooms and have done for such a long time. I think it really is probably kept so many people on the Clubhouse platform to know that the time, effort, uh, work that you put into this, and so I just want you to know that it's super appreciated. So thank you.
No doubt. Can definitely appreciate, how you got to get it up every time to put out the content and be consistent. You are like a Swiss watch, my man.
Wow. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And yeah, I just hope, yeah, because Clubhouse it's a great app, and yeah, we're hoping more people keep coming. And but yeah, I really appreciate that. And please, guys, check out the Baseball Collective as well. And there is a certain I guess affinity between uh, baseball statistics and movie statistics. There may be like a Venn diagram
Oh
of
yeah, right.
overlap.
Michael missed the baseball movie conversation. Oh, that's where the first hot take was because she didn't like Bull Durham. Yeah, you missed all that, Michael. I was thinking about you though.
Well, Brandon, we might need to do a mashup. Um, and like our own superhero movie. We'll have Superman, Batman. We'll have box office and baseball collective, and we can go back and do the sports movies and all that stuff. So
I have one more question, and that'll be it. Do you think do you think the studios will take The Flash out of theaters a lot sooner than they usually do?
Well, if the movie fizzles out, then the theaters will just not want it anymore. I think Warner Brothers will try to wring out as many dollars as it can, and there's certain deals that come into place depending on the window. Like for instance, if a movie studio puts the movie on streaming, like even for pay per view, then it changes the terms for the theatrical rentals. And so, yeah, they're already losing so much money on this. I imagine they're going to try to mitigate as much as they can. So I would not expect it to be on Max, formerly HBO Max, in the near future. But who knows? Maybe by August. I'm not sure. But let's see. Shazam came out in March and then was on like around Memorial Day, so that was about 2.5 months. I don't know. So it just depends, but yeah, that's the thing. I think theaters have a choice, so they're not locked in beyond like 2 weeks or so, typically speaking. And so if the movie's not performing, the theaters are just going to drop it.
Hmm. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question. Yeah, just wow, just the failure here, man. Gosh, and I don't take pleasure necessarily in the failure. Again, as something we talked about earlier, there's pleasure to be had in that 2 + 2 = 4. That up is still up, down is still down, etc., etc. That after all the gaslighting, reality reasserted itself because uh, this movie was kind of doomed or destined to disappoint at the very least. And but this past couple of months, we've had this barrage, this kind of media assault of how great this movie is. Even Tom Cruise, the savior of cinema's ass, supposedly saying this was a great movie and one that the theaters in the world needed. But yeah, even all that strum and drang could not lift the Flash above what it was always fated to do. I guess that's fitting for the themes of the movie, right? Anyway, Sid, long time, long time, especially for tonight, long time co-host, co-mod, etc. of the rooms. Always a pleasure, Sid. Thank you for being here tonight and all your contributions. Please follow Sid and follow everybody on stage. Follow Michael, follow David, follow the Baseball Collective. But Sid, what do you have any final thoughts, closing thoughts for the evening? I'd love to hear your closing thoughts if you can come on, Mike. Or if you can't come on, Mike, that's okay. I know you're in the Eastern time zone, so it is extraordinarily late. So but I do appreciate you, Sid, and I appreciate Julie, our other co-mod earlier, who tapped out, who made some controversial baseball statements. I hear she she always a pleasure, always a great host as well, and so thank you, Julie, and thank you, Mark, who is also here on stage. Uh, yeah, just always a font of wisdom and good humor. So thank you, Mark, as well, and I think we had Adam. Thank you, Adam. Anyway, I can go on and on. It's hard to remember everybody that was on stage, so no offense if I forget your name, but please just know that you're appreciated, and you'll see yourself in the replay, hopefully. And for me, as for some closing thoughts, I've kind of tipped my hand here, saying, as far as the Flash is concerned, I don't think anyone ever wanted this movie, or very few. And that was the fundamental flaw here. You don't spend hundreds of millions of dollars on something that very few people will want. I mean, if you do think that they should want it, like they should want a Flash movie, fine, roll the dice, but do it with a scaled back production cost. Don't give it the burden of needing to make $1 billion to break even, or whatever the figure is for this picture. That's a perfectly smart thing to do, is to try new things, have that courage of conviction that this is something that people should want. This is something worth making. Have a passion for it. I'm not sure if there was passion here with the Flash, but ultimately, if you're going to do that, just know what you're getting into, and adjust accordingly. And unfortunately, oftentimes they fall into this trap and don't do that. And I did find what I referenced earlier, this clip of John Lasseter, the former head of Pixar, and what he thinks of his formula for making a great movie. Just some basic words of wisdom that it does seem like Pixar has forgotten since Lasseter was fired. And I just wanted to close the room with a link to a YouTube video of him with his words, his golden rules for making a great movie. The man, I mean, say whatever happened, I don't know exactly, but up until then, at least, he was one of the great producers in Hollywood history. I mean, Pixar just had an epic run that coincidentally, maybe not coincidentally, ended after he left. So, anyway, there's the link. Anyway, thank you, everybody. It's the Box Office Revival. We'll see you next time. You have a good night.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.